Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to today's session. Okay, so we are continuing with the UPSC CSC Modern India series. We are looking into the NCERT textbook of class 12th regarding Modern India, and we have already completed the first couple of chapters in the previous sessions. A small portion of the second chapter is remaining that I will be starting with that today, and we will be looking into the third and fourth chapters as well. Okay, so we will be looking into European, penetration into Indian subcontinent, and we will be looking into the Anglo-Maratha Wars, Anglo-Mysore Wars, Carnatic Wars, etc., etc. Okay, so without any further ado, let's begin this session. So I request all of you who have not yet subscribed to this channel to do that. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share with the link with your friends also, so that they can also use this in case they need assistance in history. Okay, all right. One second. So second chapter, continuation. Okay, Indian states and society in 18th century. We looked into the initial. I think we have one small topic remaining in that chapter, that is the social and economic conditions of the people around that time. Okay, so after disintegration of Mughals, what happened in India, the rise of small states like Hyderabad, Bengal, etc., etc., we saw in the previous session. So how was the general setup of society and economy around this time? That is what we are going to see today. Okay, so on a whole, we can say that the social and economic setup in India was not very good. Okay, it was actually failing to make progress. India was actually failing to make progress economically, socially, culturally, etc., etc., at a pace that we would require it. Okay, overall, in all these states which were set up in medieval society, the revenue demands were increasing. Okay, the peasants were continually oppressed. Nobles were becoming increasingly greedy for high posts. Okay, rather than loyalty to their own king or their own empire, they wanted, they had selfish goals to attain. Okay, so they were more and more greedy. Some of the kings, some of the rulers actually started the system of revenue farming in their states, and this revenue farming were causing huge oppression on peasants. So we see lots of peasant revolts happening around this time. So all in all, it was a very poor social and economic setup prevailing in India. India was also a land of contrasts. Okay, very important point here. The rich lived a very rich life, and the poor was always poor. Okay, I mean, we still say this about many countries in the world. Even we say this about India right now. Okay, the very rich people, for instance, in the medieval society, the nobles, the priests, okay, and such influential people lived a very luxurious life, away from all the poverty, miserable system, etc. And the peasants who were continuously exploited kept on being exploited, and they had a very miserable life. Indian agriculture was also very stagnant and very backward. In Europe and in other Western societies, say progress were made in scientific and technological aspects. Okay, so the system of administration, agriculture was actually witnessing changes, thereby increasing productivity, etc., etc. In India, agriculture was still continuing with the traditional system. Okay, about the wooden plows and all these things, or the iron plows and all. No mechanization at all. Okay, still very traditional methods. No, original thought or no changes happened in this aspect. So the productivity was low. But we cannot say that the overall productivity was extremely low, because in order to compensate for this low productivity, or in order to compensate for this lack of mechanization in agriculture, the farmers used to put in their best efforts. Okay, the peasants used to put in their very best efforts and used to create magic in the fields. Alright, so the output was not that bad, but still the lack of science and technology had its reservations. One good thing for the peasants around those times were that the land was not fragmented, and because of that, there was no shortage of land for agriculture. The land was still very plenty available, and the peasants could cultivate there, as tenants or whatever. I mean, there were various revenue settlements and all. You have already studied it, I think. Otherwise, we will look into that when we study the medieval Indian textbooks. Okay, right Warrior system, permanent settlement system, Mahalwari and all those things, and various other policies implemented later also. Okay. Anyway, the concept of Indian village around that time was that villages had some kind of self-sufficiency. Okay, a village was considered as a self-sufficient unit. This is both good and bad. It is good in the sense that everything that is required for life, goes on, happens within the village itself. But the bad thing was that this really hampered trade and other relationship with other areas. Okay, the village became ignorant about the development of outside world. This is one of the reasons why incorporating of scientific technologies did not happen at a pace that we would require or we would want. Okay, but despite this backwardness and despite this lack of communication with the external world, still there was plentiful trade happening between the Mughal kingdom and the Western nations and other nations around India. Okay, so this was the broad setup of medieval Indian society in the 18th century. Imports and exports happened. I told you the trade relationship was still very much there. Good evening, Seema. Welcome to the class. So yeah, imports and exports were continuing, and these were the chief imports of India around this time. Okay, from the Persian Gulf, India imported pearls, raw silk, wool, dates, etc., etc. From Arabia, coffee, gold, and so on. China, tea, sugar, porcelain. Tibet, Singapore, Indonesia, Africa, ivory and drugs. From Europe, woolen clothes, etc., etc. Okay, when you study ancient India also, when you study about the trade relationship of Indus Valley people, you have to study from which country or which area did they import or export what. Okay, that is very important. For there we study that lapis lazuli was imported from Afghanistan. Okay, copper from the mines of Rajasthan. Okay, all these things, gold from the Panna gold mines or the Karnataka region. So there also we study these kinds of things. Here you can apply logic. Okay, wool etc. from Europe, obviously. Tea from China, coffee from Arabia. This is, we can answer this very logically, even if we do not know the entire list. Okay, as far as export is concerned, the most important export item of India has always been cotton textiles. Okay, mostly Indian textiles were extremely popular all over the world. We will see later also that British used to take away lots and lots of cotton textiles from India to spread in Europe. Okay, and this was known as calico cotton. Okay, so the main article of export from India was cotton. Other export items were also there. For example, silk, hardware, indigo, saltpeter, opium. Opium was a very major export of India, especially to China. Okay, then wheat, sugar, pepper. Pepper is another important spice that plays a huge role in Portuguese coming to India. Okay, we will look into that in the coming chapter. Finally, what we have to understand is that despite this import and export system, Indian exports were always more than Indian imports. Okay, exports from India were always more than imports, which means there is a imbalance in trade. Okay, there is an imbalance in trade. If export and imports are equal, then there is that balance. But here, exports are much more than imports. So what happened? It had to be compensated, right? So this compensation came in the form of precious metals, especially silver and gold. Okay, so this imbalance in trade was balanced by the infusing of more precious metals like silver and gold into India. And India, around this time, came to be known as the Sing of precious metals. Okay, the Sing of precious metals, because Indian exports were much higher than imports. Look at this. Even in the 18th century, India is still a very powerful in a country in trade relationship, etc., etc. Despite having a very weak and economic and social setup in the medieval times, still India is one of the most rich and prosperous nations in the world. But we will see that very soon this goes down, and after the British rule in India, there is a huge drain that is going to happen, and we lose all these advantages that we had around the medieval period. Okay, let's move on. Yes, exactly, Seema, correct. Moving on. Social and economic conditions of the people. So what were the social and continuing with that topic? So in general, we talked about trade relationship, we talked about economy. The society was also not that much in a very safe setup. Constant warfares. Okay, the strong Mughal monarchy started to decline, and small states started to come up across India, which means what? Which means more and more inter province wars, etc., wars by local chiefs, local rajas, governors, etc. Okay, overall constant warfare, disruption of law, clear. All this started to hamper internal trade of India. Okay, earlier the Mughals were able to maintain that peace throughout their big territory, so trade also flourished. But the moment this started to break down into small and small provinces, rebellion started to happen everywhere, and this started to harm the peaceful trade that was happening inside the country. Okay, another reason that was very much detrimental to the trade of India was the rise of autonomous provincial regimes. One thing, when more and more states come into being, it will have continuous wars with each other. But another thing to remember is that earlier, say, assume that you have to trade from point A to point B. Okay, earlier from everything that is from point A to point B was under the Mughal rule, so you can simply have that trade. Okay, no extra customs duty or anything. But due to the fragmentation and due to the rising up of more and more autonomous provincial regimes, this got fragmented. Okay, so for reaching from A to B, you have to pass through regimes of different rulers, and at each entry point you have to pay some customs duty or some other kind of taxes. Okay, so overland trade started to become more and more difficult. This also hampered the trade. Impoverishment of nobles also injured internal trade. Nobles were the people who loved luxury. They were the chief buyers of costly articles. But when nobles began to decline, and when their wealth and position began to go down, that lost patronage to various articles, and this loss of patronage hindered the trade. Okay, but despite this weak condition, still India was a very large scale manufacturer in certain kinds of items like cotton, silk, etc. Okay, even now, even after all these issues prevailing in India, still India was one of the major manufacturers of all these articles. India had many textile factories or textile industries set up in all across the country. For example, Dhaka and Murshidabad in Bengal, Patna in Bihar, Surat, Ahmedabad, Bhuj in Gujarat. Okay, you can read this entire list. Okay, you have to read these places because in UPSC a question might come giving you a place and or say giving you 4 or 5 places and asking you which of them were important centers of cotton textiles or important centers of silk, etc. Okay, so just read through this entire list. I will share this note in my Telegram channel. You can download it from there and go through it, or you can read it from your NCERT. Okay, it's there available. Then Kashmir was a chief center of woolen manufacturers. Shipbuilding industry flourished in Maharashtra, Andhra, Bengal, all these places. Okay, so India was still doing pretty good despite all these negative aspects that came up in the 18th century. Yes, correct, Seema. Education. Okay, so what was this kind of education that was happening? Overall, it was very much defective. Okay, it's safe to say that it was defective. Why? Number one, it was out of touch from rapid developments of West. Okay, Indian system of education was very much traditional, that it focused on literature, law, religion, philosophy, logic, etc., and did not give enough importance to science, technology, and geography. This was a major drawback of Indian system of education. Okay, earlier, if you remember, if you have studied ancient India, you would know that we had plenty of textbooks on mathematics, textbooks on, say, surgery, medicine. Okay, there were innovations, and India was pretty good at that around that time. But in the medieval society, we see that all this has gone into a kind of stagnation, and education was focusing on philosophy, literature, and all these things. Science, geography, etc. lagged behind. Original thought was discouraged. Okay, people began to give more importance and significance to the existing or traditional methods rather than giving respect to the original thought. So discouraging original thought was a major drawback of medieval Indian society. As far as Hindus were concerned, their education was done in the Sanskrit language, and the learning was mostly confined to Brahmins. The education was imparted through temples and educational institutions surrounding the temples. Similarly, for Muslims, it was given in Persian language, and this education was given to them through maktabs or madrasas, through mosques, etc., etc. So religious institutions played a huge role in education in the medieval society. Okay. However, elementary education was still quite widespread. Okay, elementary education was still very much widespread, and it was even open to the lower castes. Okay, we might think that it is only affair of the higher castes or Brahmins, etc., etc., but it was not like that. Although it was predominantly given to the higher classes, some lower classes, so lower class people also found it easy to access elementary education around this time. Okay, despite all these drawbacks, one good thing about medieval Indian education is that teachers were given proper respect, or say they enjoyed a high position in the community. Okay, the concept of teacher had a very high position in society. Nowadays we do not see that kind of thing. Okay, but this was one positive aspect of medieval Indian education. One major negative was that girls were seldom given education. Okay, in general, education was provided or targeted for boys and men. Girls were seldom educated, and this was a major drawback. There are exceptions. Some exceptions are of course there, but in general they were not given proper education. Okay, now let's look at how this cultural life or the social and cultural setup was for certain sections of the Indian society. First of all, Hindus. Okay. Yes, continuing. Stagnation and dependence on past. So in general, society and culture was stagnated, very much traditional, orthodox, and depending on the past. There was no uniformity of culture and social patterns all over the country. Okay, and nor did all the Hindus and Muslims form two distinct societies. This is a very important point. India is a land of diversity. Okay, so there is huge diversity within the Indian subcontinent in various fields. Okay, say religion, language, huge diversities in all these fields. But even in that diversity, there was some kind of unity. Okay, because the prime reason of this unity is because of the Mughal dynasty, who ruled all over the Indian subcontinent, or at least say the most part of the Indian subcontinent. So when a single or when a common dynasty rules over a huge portion of land, the people will have something in common, or the people will start to develop, the subjects will start to develop something in common despite their differences. Okay, so there was differences in certain aspects and there was similarities in some other aspects. Clear? Now, the social life and culture of upper classes was in many respects different from that of the lower classes. I think this point need not be explained. You already know this. Upper classes had their own method of living, and it was based and means beyond the social life of lower classes. Upper class Hindus and upper class Muslims had more in common than a lower class Hindu and a upper class Hindu, or a lower class Muslim and a upper class Muslim. So the class difference was very much visible in the medieval Indian society. Okay, caste was still the central feature of Hindu religion. Okay, the social life of Hindus were still very much rigidly controlled by caste, where there was clear division of people based on caste. It actually permanently fixed the position of a person in the society in a social scale. Intercaste marriages were forbidden. Interdining was also very much restricted. Interdining means dining of people from various castes dining together. This was also very much restricted. Okay, so a conservative kind of society existed with a very rigid influence of the caste system in India. It was of course possible for a person to acquire a higher social status by acquisition of high office or power. This is also a possibility. Okay, despite this rigidity of caste, still, if that person manages to climb in the social if he manages to achieve a higher position within the kingdom or within the territory, then automatically he will have a higher status in caste also. Okay, in that sense, a person is able to uplift his social position in the eyes of others. Sometimes this happens to an entire clan or an entire caste. Okay, the entire caste will get uplifted because of some kind of influence in the ruling society, the ruling dynasty or something like that. Okay, so that was also possible in the medieval India. This is about Hindus. Now, what was the issue with Muslims, or what was the kind of setup that have taken place that happened in Muslim society or Muslim community? Okay, Muslims doesn't have exactly what we call a caste system. Okay, but even then they also have some kind of system that caused all this division and caused all these problems. We all know that there are two kinds of, broadly they can be classified as two, the Shias and Sunnis. Okay, and there were many conflicts always between Shias and Sunni Muslims. Okay, based on their belief, based on something else. Okay, so although they did not have different castes like Hindus, still they found enough to have some kind of fights. Okay, then there were other kinds of Muslims, say Iranis, Afghanis, Turani, Hindustani Muslims. Okay, all these had their own beliefs, their own systems, their own cultures. Clear? So whenever it conflicted with each other, it went into quarrels, and they were at loggerheads. The Hindus who converted to Islam in the medieval society, also brought in some kind of caste related practices into Islam. That is also a very important point to note, because in the medieval Indian society, the ruling class was Muslims, the Mughals. Okay, Mughals and their governors, etc., mostly Muslims. So in the Muslim setup, there were many Hindus who converted to Islam. Clear? So when a person converts into another religion, it doesn't mean that he will leave everything of his religion back and goes into the new religion. No, that does not happen. He will obviously have certain, characters that are part of his earlier religion or earlier caste, and that he will take along with him into the new religion. So that cultural synthesis between Hinduism and Islam happened a lot around this time. Clear? Also, so that is another point. Finally, the Sharif Muslims looked down upon the Ajlaf Muslims. So who are these Sharif Muslims and who are these Ajlaf Muslims? Sharif Muslims are the well-to-do Muslims. Okay, they are the nobles. They are the priestly classes. Okay, the well-off, the high-status people among the Muslims are the Sharif Muslims. Ajlaf Muslims are the lower classes, like the peasants, laborers, farmers, etc., etc. So the high-class people always look down upon lower-class people. Okay, don't get confused by these words, Sharif and Ajlaf. Take a note of it. Okay. Yes, correct. Social and cultural life regarding women. So we looked into Hindus, we looked into Muslims. Now we are seeing what was the condition of women in the medieval Indian setup in the 18th century. Okay. As usual, family system was, okay, to no surprise, it is primarily patriarchal. Patriarchal means what? It means it is dominated by males. Okay, a system where the males are dominated is known as a patriarchal system. The head of the family is the eldest male in that family. Okay, this system existed throughout the Indian subcontinent except in Kerala. In Kerala Nair family, we can see a system of matrilineal society. Okay, so apart from Kerala, everywhere else, almost everywhere else, we see a very concrete patriarchal system. Women were subjected to nearly complete male control. They were expected to live as mothers, wives, only in that area, and they were not allowed to work outside their homes. And they were in general they did not have that individuality in the medieval Indian setup. But one thing to note is, in those roles as mothers, wives, etc., they were very much respected and they were given great honor. Okay, that is very important. They were not allowed to do various works according to their wishes, etc. But although they were stuck in the roles of mothers and wives only, still they were given huge respect and huge honor. Even if battles happen between two territories, women are always untouched. Okay, the enemy will not humiliate or molest a woman. That was the kind of respect that women had in the medieval society. Okay, unfortunately we do not have that now, but that kind of respect towards women. But in other ways we have evolved and we have become more liberal. We are looking for gender equality, right? Women empowerment. So you can actually relate medieval Indian society with the modern world. Where all have we come up and where all have we bent down? Okay, try to analyze it in that matter in a critically analytic fashion. All right. Women of the time possessed little individuality of their own, but obviously there are exceptions. Ahilyabai Holkar, a very important personality in history. Ahilyabai Holkar, who herself ruled over Indore for about 30 years. Okay, so such women were also there. Later we will see Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi. Okay, so plenty of exceptions are there, but we are talking about a general picture here. Okay, women of upper classes were not allowed to work outside their homes, but women of lower classes used to go to agricultural fields and earn a living on their own or help their husbands. Okay, so we can understand that the upper caste society was much more conservative compared to the lower class systems. Parda was common mostly in the northern Indian region among upper classes, but it was not practiced in the south. So this is another prelims question which can trick you. Okay, if a statement comes that Parda system was completely absent in India, it's wrong. It was prevalent in northern India. We cannot say that, but if it says that Parda system was popular in South India, then it is wrong. So in South India, Parda system was not there. Okay, so very careful while attempting such kinds of statements. Continue. Marriages were arranged by the heads of families. Okay, we do not have the concept of love marriage or anything around those times. In ancient India, we study 8 forms of marriage. Okay, but in medieval society, we can more or less say most of the marriages, I think almost all the marriages were actually arranged by the heads of the families. For men, polygamy was allowed. Okay, polygamy was there, polyandry was not there. I hope you know what polygamy and polyandry is. Polygamy means a man can take more than one wife. Polyandry is a wife can take more than one husband. Okay, so polygamy was allowed, but it was never practiced much. Okay, only those families which are very wealthy took more than one wife. Otherwise, it was more or less monogamous relationships. Okay, women was expected to marry only once, so polyandry was absent. Okay, and early marriage system was very much prevalent. Dowry system was very much prevalent. I think these are self-explanatory, so I am not going into depth. Okay, dowry was actually controlled in certain parts of India. For example, in Maharashtra, the Peshwas were very much energetic in trying to abolish dowry. Okay, so except in Maharashtra, in most other places, dowry system was also very much prevalent. Two of the most evil aspects of medieval Indian society as far as women were concerned are the sati system and the condition of widows. You all know what sati is, right? If you have seen the Padmavat, the Johar is actually kind of something like that. Okay, I mean Johar is different, but sati means a girl is expected to burn in the funeral pyre of her husband. Okay, in Johar it's different. Johar, the Rajput women jump into the funeral pyre to escape or to avoid being humiliated by the enemies. Okay, to protect their honor. That is Johar. In Sati, it's not like, it's different. The woman is supposed to jump into the funeral pyre of her husband. Sometimes it's done willingly, sometimes it's done forcefully. Okay, that's also there. So sati was very much prevalent in certain parts of India, but it was uncommon in South. Okay, in South, sati was very much uncommon. Even in North, only the upper classes actually conducted sati. Lower classes never really looked into these kinds of evils. Condition of widows was very much bad. Okay, widows who were belonging to upper classes, they could not remarry. Okay, they once they are widowed, they have to live the life of a widow. They cannot remarry. Okay, but in some castes, in some places, in some religions, widow remarriage was also there. For all these things, there are exceptions. Okay, in general, widows had a very miserable life. So widows were expected to renounce all the worldly pleasures. They were not expected to go to festivities or celebrations. They cannot take part in festivals, etc., etc. They had to live a life of a very austere life, serving the family of her husband or her brother, etc., etc. So a miserable condition. Some people who were very much heartfelt on seeing the conditions of widows tried to do something about it. For example, Raja Jai Singh of Amber. Similarly, the Maratha general Parshuram Bhau. These kinds of people tried to uplift the condition of women in medieval society, but failed. Okay, we will see that later Raja Ram Mohan Roy and say Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. These people, when the social reformers in the beginning of 18th century and later on, we see, some elevation in the status of widows, etc., etc. In medieval society also, there were some attempts to alleviate widows of their misery, but it was not successful. Okay. Yes, correct, Vasanta Lakshmi. Yeah, welcome to the class. Correct, Seema. Alright, so this is about women. Now, in general, regarding culture, what happened regarding culture? Okay, in 18th century, more or less, there was a cultural exhaustion in India. Okay, what do you mean by cultural exhaustion? That you will understand once I am done through this slide. Okay, there was continuity from early times, from the medieval period throughout. So there was that continuity from the past, but the problem was that it remained traditionalist. Okay, there was nothing innovative. Also, there was some, changes or some tendencies towards artificialism. Okay, the medieval Indian literature. We will look into literature later, but for example, in literature, it lost touch from reality and it started to become more and more decorative and artificial, etc., etc., mechanical. Okay, so in general, there was a cultural exhaustion in 18th century. Cultural continuity was there from the preceding centuries, but at the same time, it remained wholly traditionalist. Okay, wholly stagnant, wholly traditionalist. What may be the reasons for this? Most important reason is the lack of royal patronage. Mughals collapsed. Okay, the nobles became less and less wealthy. I mean, their position also started deteriorating. Okay, there were plenty of infighting. Clear, the society and economy was itself becoming very weak. So there was clear lack of patronage or lack of enthusiasm into cultural aspects. Clear, right? I mean, everybody wants to have a basic living first, and then only we will go for music, art, dance, etc., etc. Okay, these are secondary compared to basic subsistence activities. Correct. So the lack of patronage affected the cultural setup in India. When Mughals collapsed, what happened? Many painters or many musicians and many artists in the Mughal kingdom or in the Mughal dynasty went to peripheral dynasties or to the newborn kingdoms, to Hyderabad, to Bengal, etc., etc. And this actually led to the formation of new schools of painting, for example. In terms of painting, new schools of painting started to emerge. For example, the Kangra painting, Rajput schools. Okay, so why did this happen? Because while these painters were at the Mughal court, they had a system of painting. Now, the Islamic rules and etc. were followed. The miniature painting system was followed. But when they moved to or migrated to a different kingdom, what happened? They had to adapt to the new culture that is existing in that kingdom. So now we see a cultural synthesis. Okay, different cultures mingling together, and this started to evolve into new methods of painting, a new kind of culture altogether. And that is how Kangra school, Rajput school, etc. became very much popular. Clear? Similarly, architecture also started to flourish. For example, the Imambara of Lucknow, city of Jaipur and its buildings. Okay, Raja Savai Jai Singh built the city of Jaipur, the Pink City. If you have seen the beautiful, architectural styles in Jaipur, you can see that newborn, the cultural synthesis between the Rajput region and the Mughals and the Islamic culture, etc., etc. Okay, the Hawa Mahal, for example. Okay, music continued to develop and flourish in 18th century. Significant progress was made in this field at the time of Muhammad Shah. Yesterday we studied about Muhammad Shah. Muhammad Shah was a ruler who was very, luxury loving, a very, worthless ruler in a sense that he is not at all a good statesman, but he was very much, enthusiastic about music. So music developed under his reign, under the reign of Muhammad Shah. Muhammad Shah Rangila. It is under his reign Nadir Shah came to India. I hope you remember that. Okay. So languages. So what happened to languages? This is a time when we see most of the languages starts to flourish. Okay, the vernacular languages start to flourish. Urdu come up into high prominence. Okay, so in general, Indian languages lost its touch with life and became decorative, artificial, mechanical, traditional, etc. I already explained this in the previous slide. Okay, it starts to lose touch with life. It became very much decorative. Okay, we can compare certain literary works of medieval times or ancient times and what happened after medieval times or the end of medieval times. Okay, towards the end of medieval times, it was more into decoration or more. It did not resemble the reality. Okay, that is what it means. It became more and more decorative rather than realistic. Clear? It reflected the pessimistic attitude that was prevailing in the country. That cultural exhaustion is clearly visible in medieval Indian literature. Okay, but even then, some positives were there. For example, the language of Urdu started to spread. Okay, Urdu language was born in medieval times and it started to become more and more popular. And towards the end of 18th century, it became extremely popular. Okay, and it became the medium of intercourse between the upper classes in northern India. Thanks to certain great poets of Urdu language such as Mir Sauda, Nazir, and Mirza Ghalib. Mirza Ghalib actually came in the 19th century. Okay, Mirza Ghalib is in the 19th century, but even then, these three are great poets in Urdu language. So Urdu language flourished around this time. Similarly, in South India, in the state of Kerala, the Malayalam literature started to see a revival. Okay, Malayalam literature started to flourish around this time, thanks to certain rulers of Travancore, such as Martandavarma and his successor Ramavarma. Yesterday we looked into this ruler, Ramavarma. He himself was a patron of arts. He himself was a playwright, an actor, etc., etc. Okay, so Malayalam literature flourished. Kunjan Nambyar, a very famous personality in Malayalam. He is the proponent of the Ottan Tullal, another very important cultural form of Kerala. Okay, he lived around this time. Similarly, the development of Kathakali literature, okay, drama, dance, etc. Architecturally also, the Padmanabhapuram Palace, the Padmanabhapuram Palace came into existence around this time. So overall, we see some kind of revival in the vernacular language of Malayalam. Then, in Tamil, we had another important personality known as Thayumanavar. Okay, and he was one of the best exponents of sitar poetry in Tamil. Okay, and through his poetry, he actually protested against the abusive temple rule, against the caste system, etc., etc. So there also we see Tamil language also flourishing around this time. In Assam, the Assami language was given patronage by the Ahom kings. I hope you remember about Ahoms from your medieval Indian classes. Otherwise, please do go read your NCERT Medieval India textbook. We will take that after Modern India. But anyway, Ahom kings actually patronized Assami literature. Dayaram was a great lyricist in Gujarati. So Gujarati also flourished. Heer Rancha, a very important treatise in Punjabi language, a romantic epic in Punjabi language, was written by Waris Shah. A probable prelims question, match the following question. Make sure to remember this. Heer Rancha was written by Waris Shah in Punjabi language. That is also important. Okay, don't miss out the language. Sometimes in the question paper, it might say that Heer Rancha is written by Waris Shah in Urdu. Okay, don't be in a hurry in answering those questions. Read it and be very careful about each and every word in that question. Okay, Sindhi literature also flourished around this time, thanks to Shah Abdul Latif, who composed a very famous collection of poems known as Risalo. Okay, Risalo is written by Shah Abdul Latif in Sindhi language. Other important writers in this language are Sanchal and Sami. Okay, so overall we see that vernacular languages flourished around the 18th century, despite India having a cultural exhaustion. Clear? But remember, even though these languages flourished, it lost touch with reality and it became increasingly decorative, mechanical, artificial, etc. Okay? Science. This is the area where India witnessed a huge downward movement. Okay, extremely stagnant, not at all, zero innovation. Okay, lagging behind the West, ignorant of the West. This was the main weakness of Indian culture. Okay, in the field of science, Indian mind was still tied to tradition. Nobles, common man, everybody was into superstition. Okay, lots of highly superstitious society. not appealing to science or not appealing to reason or anything. Okay, but in Europe we see that around some time before, Renaissance has happened, Reformation has happened, Enlightenment has happened. All these actually made industrial revolution possible in Western, European nations. That did not happen in India. In India, the Indian Reformation happens in the 19th century only. Okay, the educated Indians such as Raja Ram Mohan Roy, etc., appears in India only in the 19th century. Until then, we do not see that much, change in the superstitious and very much traditionalistic attitude of Indian culture, Indian society. Okay, struggle for power and wealth, etc., was very much selfish, and the nobles actually became extremely selfish, and they start to live a degenerated life. Okay, they did not care about their empire or kingdom or anything. They had selfish goals. Okay, all this actually pushed down pulled down the Indian social setup. But although the upper class, especially the nobles, had a degenerate kind of life, it is very surprising to see that the common people of India still upheld that kind of integrity and morality. Okay, this is a very important statement. Despite the nobles having a degenerated public or private life, the common people of India were not debased to any marked extent, and they upheld high degree of personal integrity and morality. Clear? Now, we saw Hindus and Muslims or what happened among them, but now we are going to see what was the relationship between them. Okay, earlier we saw the caste system was very rigid among Hindus, and say in Muslims it was Shias and Sunnis, etc., etc. So now we are going to see how Hindus and Muslims were towards each other. Okay, friendly relations. Okay, Jenny, welcome. Alright, if you have any queries, put it in the chat. I will look into it at the end of each slide. Okay, so friendly relationship between Hindus and Muslims. So there were fights, obviously. Different kings, rulers, nobles, etc. had fights between each other, but it was never in terms of religion. Okay, a fight between a Hindu dynasty and a Muslim dynasty was never because one was Hindu and one was Muslim. It was always because he wanted some extra wealth or say some territory, or it's always political. It was never religious or communal in nature. Exceptions are there, but in general, never communal. Okay. Due to this intermingling of Indian and Islamic people in India, there evolved a composite Hindu-Muslim culture. In architecture, in painting, in language, clear, even in dressing style. Okay, Hindu writers often used Persian language, and they used to write in Persian language. Similarly, Muslims used to write in Hindi language. They used to write about Rama, Krishna, etc., etc. Okay, Urdu language developed around this time, and this actually provided a meeting ground for Hindus and Muslims. Okay, Urdu was more or less an output of, the Hindi language was also there, Persian was also there. So intermingling of these languages actually gave rise to Urdu. And Urdu language was a common ground for both Hindus and Islam. This is the cultural synthesis I am talking about. Clear? So Bhakti and Sufi movement. I hope you remember about Bhakti movement and Sufi movement that happened in medieval Indian society. But it was still there. Okay, the influence of these two movements were still happening throughout India, and this also led to the close cooperation between Hindus and Muslims in a large field. Hindus used to worship Sufi saints, or the Muslim saints. Similarly, there were plenty of Muslims who used to worship the Hindu gods and saints. Okay, so there was respect and faith on each other. Muslims used to celebrate Hindu festivals such as Durga Puja, Diwali, etc. And Hindus used to celebrate the Muslim festivals like Muharram. Okay, so Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the greatest Indian of the first half of 19th century, was influenced in an equal measure by Hindu and Islamic philosophical and religious systems. Very important. Okay, so in general, both these religions coexisted in India in absolute harmony. Exceptions are there, but still, in general, there was nothing communal in the later part of 18th century and in the first half of 19th century. Okay, the ways of life of upper class Hindus and Muslims converged much more than the ways of life of upper class and lower class Hindus or of upper class and lower class Muslims. I already explained this point in the first slide, but this is a very important point. Try to remember. Okay, upper class Hindus, lower class Hindus, upper class Muslims, lower class Muslims. These two categories had more in common between each other rather than these two and these two. Clear? Despite being different religions, still classes were closely related. Classes had more convergence. Upper classes of Hindus and Muslims had more in common than the lower classes of Hindus and Muslims. Okay. Also, another point of divergence was the region. Okay, in South India there existed a particular form of life. In North India it was different. In East India it was different. So was in West India. So in South India, a South Indian Hindu and Muslim will have more in common than a South Indian Hindu and a North Indian Hindu, or a South Indian Muslim and a North Indian Muslim. See, so region also played a point of divergence in the medieval Indian setup. Clear? So that is about life, the social and economic life at the medieval Indian society. Okay, I hope that much is clear. So we have finished second chapter there. Now we are going to see two chapters today. That is the beginnings of European settlements and how Europe penetrated into India, the British establishment in India. Okay, these two are actually a bit lengthy chapters, but most of these points in these chapters are political in nature. Okay, we will be looking into plenty of wars, the Carnatic wars, Anglo-Mysore wars, etc., etc. These are dry areas. Okay, a bit boring in the sense that there is nothing, in the sense that there are plenty of points, how the war went, who defeated whom, all these things. But you do not have to study, the entire course of a war. Okay, when you study about a war, you have to study about what is the cause of that war, who all were the participants, and what is the aftermath. That's it. You don't have to study the course of war. Okay, we will look into that in this chapter. So let's begin. Chapter 3, the beginnings of European settlements. Okay. So India's trade relationship with Europe go back to the ancient days of the Greeks. Okay, we know that. I mean, it is nothing new. India had trade relationship with Europe for a very long time. It's not like Portuguese were the first time India witnessing European people or anything like that. But of the major European powers who came to India, the first one was Portuguese. Okay, we will study why Portuguese came here, what was what happened afterwards, etc. very soon. So the Asian part in medieval times, okay, around this time, the Asian part of the trade was actually conducted by the Arabs. Arabs, merchants and sailors were extremely popular around Asia. They were the people who did trade in Asia. Similarly, in Mediterranean and European regions, it was the Italians. Okay, Italians and Arabs, these two were the major powers. So for other European nations, say Portuguese, etc., to come to India, they had to go through the territories, or they had to go through areas which are controlled by or monopolized by Arabs and Italians. Okay, and around this time we see that there's some wars happen in Europe, in Asia, etc., etc. Anyway, eventually Europeans managed to come to India. We do not have to go into those wars, Genoa, etc. Okay, Genoa was a very important place held by the Italians, and once Genoa declined, it was easier for other European powers to come to India. We do not have to go into that. Anyway, the most important thing that attracted the Europeans to Indians were the Eastern spices. Not to India, in general to Asia. Okay, Indonesia, the East Indies, and the Indian subcontinent. Okay, the Eastern spices. Why? Because during winter season, Europeans used to eat meat. Okay, and the meat is palpable only with proper spices. So pepper, etc. were very much important as their diet. Okay, and spice trade attracted Europeans to India and East Indies. East Indies means Indonesia. Okay, Western European states and merchants began to search for new and safer routes to India and the Spice Islands of Indonesia. Okay, they began to look for new alternate sea routes rather than going overland. They wanted to find new trade routes. Okay, and this actually led to finding of lots and lots of new parts of the globe. Okay, for example, Christopher Columbus. Okay, here you can see the first steps were taken by Portugal and Spain. Portuguese and Spain. And Christopher Columbus, who actually was set up to come to India, he accidentally discovered America. Okay, Columbus of Spain, who was supposed to reach India, he accidentally discovered America. Similarly, we see lots and lots of new parts in the globe are discovered around this time. Okay, so the shipbuilding, I missed the point here, that is very important, so I am going back. Shipbuilding and the science of navigation developed or had great advances around this time. Okay, all these Europeans were in a race to discover new countries and use their resources, etc., etc. So in general, shipbuilding and the science of navigation saw a huge rise. So Christopher Columbus discovered America. In 1498, Vasco da Gama of Portugal discovered an alternate sea route to Asia or to India, and this sea route passes through the Cape of Good Hope. Okay, so the first European power to land in India is the Portuguese, and the first person to do that was under Vasco da Gama. In 1498, he reached the port of Kapad in the province of Kerala. Okay, Kapad in Kerala is the first place where the Europeans arrived, the Portugal arrived. Okay, so they actually penetrated Africa also in their trade. Why? Because Africa was very much famous for ivory and gold. Okay, also slave trade. Okay, when Europeans go to a new area and colonize that place, they start to establish plantations. Okay, tea plantations, coffee plantations, etc., etc. But these plantations are labor intensive, which means lot of human capital is required for proper functioning of these plantations. And for this purpose, they have to bring in more and more manual force. Okay, in Europe there was not adequate for manpower available at that time, so they also engaged in slave trade. Slaves were used for works in plantations, factories, etc., etc. Okay, so there was a triangular trade. What happened was, assume that this is Europe. Okay, this is Europe, and this is Africa. Okay, and this is America. Okay, just assume that this is America. So what happened in medieval times was, the Europeans used to come with their goods into Africa. Okay, it starts from here, from Europe. From Europe, they used to come to Africa with their finished products. And here they exchange these finished products for some money as well as slaves. Okay, Negroes. And they take these people into America, to their colonies. Okay, from Africa to America. In America, it is a new territory, very recently discovered by Christopher Columbus, and they are colonizing America using their resources, setting up plantations. So in the American plantations, these slaves brought from Africa used to work. Clear? And in exchange for those slave trade, the Europeans used to get raw materials. Okay, the newly discovered area of America has plenty of raw materials, and these raw materials were taken back to Europe. Again, this was converted into finished goods and brought to Africa. Slaves were taken from Africa to America. New raw materials are obtained from America, again taken back to Europe. So this is a triangular trade. Okay, this was the chief source of money and influence for Europeans at that time. And the money they earned from this kind of trade actually bolstered or boosted their industrial revolution in 18th and 19th century. This is from where the Europeans found enough money to have that revolution, industrial revolution, in the 18th and 19th century. I hope that's very clear. Okay? Yes. Now, in 16th century, European merchants and soldiers also began the long process of first penetrating and then subjugating Asian lands to their control. So, colonization started to happen. Okay, they arrive as traders, and then they start to capture territories and finally, establish power in that region and colonize that region. That is how they always work, all the Europeans. Okay, the Portuguese were the first to do it. When Portuguese came to India, they established their trading settlements in Cochin, Goa, Daman and Diu. Okay, how was the Portuguese able to do this? They were able to compete against the Arab merchants. Why? Because Portuguese were unparalleled at the sea at that time. They had very superior naval force. Their navy was second to none in the world at that time. Okay, Portuguese and Spain. So Portuguese managed to establish all these trading facilities in India using their superiority of their navy. Okay, also they took advantage of the mutual rivalries of Indian princes. Okay, I mean in India the system was very much we know what happened. Okay, everybody was fighting against each other, quarrel, doesn't matter if even if there is another enemy coming, still we will fight each other. That was the condition of Indian princes at that time, and the European powers took advantage of that situation. Okay, so it was Alfonso de Albuquerque who captured Goa and established the Portuguese headquarters in Goa. When I teach you this, go back and read the corresponding chapter in your NCERT textbook, and at the same time try to read the Spectrum textbook also. Okay, because in Spectrum textbook, each and every governors of the Portuguese, Dutch, etc. are given. For example, Albuquerque, Almeida. Okay, all these are given individually, so you will get more points from them. Okay, the blue water policy, the cartilage system, those are not given in the NCERT textbook, but it is given in the Spectrum textbook. Okay, so do read that portion from your Spectrum textbook. Portuguese were intolerant and fanatical in religious matters. Okay, they were not religiously tolerant. They were actually fanatical, and they actually forcibly converted Indians into Christianity. Okay, so one advantage the Portuguese had was they established their dominance in West India, especially in not West India, sorry, South India, a region which was outside the control of Mughals. Okay, this was a major advantage to Portuguese, because if it was still if it was a province under the Mughal control, then obviously they will have to fight the Mughals. Mughals are still a pretty much good force. Okay, Mughals are, yeah, they are obviously disintegrating, they are obviously declining, but even then Mughals are still a prominent force in India, or probably the strongest force in India, or say Marathas are the strongest force in India. But Portuguese chose south. Okay, they came to Kerala, they established power in Goa. Okay, so they did not have to face such huge might of Indian dynasties at that time. This was very much advantageous to Portuguese. Okay, because we see that later in 1631 they attack Bengal. Bengal is a stronghold of Mughal dynasty at that time, and there they fail. Okay, Mughals drive them off from Hooghly. Clear? So when they come to face a real power in India, they failed. So their establishment in South was a very intellectual decision. Okay. Other powers who came to India apart from Portuguese were the English, Holland or Dutch, okay, and later France. Danes also came to India. Okay, Denmark. Danes also came to India. It's not given in NCERT. Again, study from Spectrum. Okay, so Holland, England, France, and Danes also came to India. Clear? In 1588, okay, by this time, all these European countries were in a frantic race of dominating the sea and to find new colonies. Portuguese, Spain, English, everybody wanted new colonies. Okay, so English also started to rise their navy and more to discover more and more land. In 1588, they defeated the Spanish fleet known as Armada. Armada was one of the strongest fleet around that time, and Spain was actually ruling the sea. Portuguese and Spain were the initial rulers of the sea, and English managed to defeat Spanish Armada in 1588. This shattered the Spanish supremacy over the sea forever. From now onwards, English is the number one as far as navy is concerned. Clear? Similarly, in 1602, the Dutch East India Company was formed. Okay, and their main interest did not lie in India. They were eyeing towards spice trade, which was more common or more prominent in Indonesia or the East Indies. So they were looking into Java, Sumatra, islands of Indonesia. Okay, but even then, they established certain strongholds in India. For example, Surat, Broch, Cambay, Ahmedabad, Kerala, etc. etc. Chinsura. Alright. In 1658, they also conquered Ceylon from Portuguese. They also treated people very cruelly, very harshly. They had a very intolerable non-liberal religious policy, forcible conversions, etc. etc. Alright, this is about the Dutch people. But now we see the establishment of a very major important company as far as Indian history is concerned. The establishment of English East India Company happened in the year 1599. Okay, this is very much detrimental eventually to India. We know what happens afterwards. But this company, which eventually ruled India, was established in the year 1599 under the auspices of a group of merchants named as Merchant Adventurers. This is how East India Company takes its birth. And it received a royal charter, okay, to trade exclusively east of the Cape of Good Hope. Okay, you know where the Cape of Good Hope is. Cape of Good Hope is the bottommost point of Africa. Okay, this is Africa. If this is Africa, this is Cape of Good Hope. Okay, and English East India Company received the exclusive charter or the exclusive right through the charter to trade east of the Cape of Good Hope. So no other English company can or English personnel can trade with anything that is east of Cape of Good Hope. And this was granted to them by Queen Elizabeth on 31st of December 1600. Okay, and from now onwards, this merchant adventurers and this company came to be called as East India Company. English East India Company. Okay, this is how English East India Company is born. In 1608, it decided to open its first factory in India, and it set up a factory in Surat, in Gujarat. Okay, in the state of province of Gujarat, in a place called Surat, it set up its first factory, and Captain Hawkins came to India, and he went into the court of Jahangir. Jahangir was the Mughal ruler at that time. Mughal dynasty was very much powerful at that time. So we see that they come as traders and they flatter the king, they beg for some concessions, etc., etc. Now at this time, English East India Company is in no way powerful enough to compete with Mughals. Mughals were far superior to English East India Company at this time. Okay, it was Jahangir's rule. We have Shah Jahan, we have Aurangzeb, etc. also to come. Only after the death of Aurangzeb does the Mughal dynasty comes to decline. Clear? So anyway, Captain Hawkins went to Jahangir's court, and he was very well, very enthusiastically welcomed to his court. He was given a very good mansab, etc., etc. Jahangir was very pleased to welcome Captain Hawkins into his court. Problem was that the Portuguese did not like it. Portuguese were already in India, and they had some influence in the Mughal court, and Portuguese did not like this. So Portuguese tried to clear off England from the Mughal court, and they succeeded in doing that. Okay, so William Hawkins or Captain Hawkins, mission actually failed. Clear? But then something interesting happened. What was that? British managed to defeat Portuguese naval squadron near Surat in 1612 and then again in 1614. Portuguese was the masters of the sea at that time. You already remember that. But now English were also very competing power. So when English Navy defeated the Portugal Navy near to Surat, Mughal Emperor was impressed. Okay, Mughals were impressed. But because until now, Mughal Navy was minimal. Okay, they were not at all strong. So Portuguese commanded the sea. Overland trade was commanded by the Mughals, but still over the sea trade was commanded by Portugal Navy. Okay, so the Emperor was not happy with that. But now another navy has defeated the Portuguese, and that is the British. So the Emperor was impressed by the British Navy. So the Mughals thought that they can actually use British against the Portuguese domination in the sea. They also thought that Indian merchants would be certainly benefiting from some competition between foreigners. Okay, so this was the thought process of Mughals. Okay, one, they can use the English force against the Portuguese naval supremacy, and two, more foreigners means more competition, and Indian merchants can actually benefit from this competition. Okay, so the English company was given permission to set up a factory in India, in Mughal provinces. Clear? So English East India Company has now established in India. Later, in 1615, Thomas Roe reached the Mughal court. Thomas Roe, another ambassador of British East India Company, reached the Mughal court. And he was successful in achieving an imperial farman to trade and establish factories in all parts of Mughal Empire. Okay, so English is actually step by step taking their, establishing their foot in India. Clear? Later, in 1662, Portuguese gave the island of Bombay to King Charles II of England as dowry on marrying the Portuguese Princess Catherine. Okay, we will see that what happened in that later, but understand that Bombay was still a Portuguese stronghold, and this was actually given to Britain by by Portuguese. not because of some peace treaty or anything, but as dowry for to the British king for marrying the Portuguese princess. This is how England gets holds of Bombay, and British actually developed Bombay into a major seaport later. Clear? Until the development of Bombay, Surat was the most important port in the western coast of India. But when Bombay starts to develop, Surat will decline. Okay, so this is how England gets hold of Bombay. Surat was favorable to British as they did not have to face a strong government there. Why? Because Marathas were fighting with each other. Vijayanagara kingdom, around this time Marathas are not there. The Vijayanagara kingdom had declined, and some local provinces, local rajas and chiefs were there ruling over this region. The Mughal control over this region was minimal. So Surat was a very ample area to start their factory, to set up their factory. The first factory that English set up in South India was at Masulipatanam in the year 1611. Okay, although they set up this factory, very soon they shifted their center to Madras. Okay, Madras was actually given to them by local Raja. Okay, and in Madras, British set up a fort known as Fort St. George. Very important fort for Britain. The Fort St. George was set up in Madras, which was actually granted to them by a local Raja. And they shifted their headquarters from Masulipatanam, southern headquarters from Masulipatanam to Madras. Okay, so just think about it. England has Bombay, England has Madras, which means what? They have two exits to the sea, both at the west and at the east. Very soon they will get Bengal also. Okay, so England controlled the major ports of India around that time, and this is a very significant point because English was a superior naval power. Okay, so controlling important ports has a huge advantage for them. Okay, so in eastern India, the English company had opened its first factories in Orissa in 1633. So they are expanding their foothold in India slowly. But what was the Mughals doing around this time? In the first class, I told you that Aurangzeb was engaged in a war in Deccan. Okay, he even neglected his throne in Delhi, and he spent 25 years in Deccan fighting a useless war, a very exhausting war. So when Aurangzeb's attention was focused into the Deccan, other players in Indian subcontinent started to influence their autonomy, influence their power. Correct? So English East India Company also took advantage of this lack of attention by the Mughal emperor. Okay, so this led to English abandoning the role of humble petitioners. So rather than being humble to the Mughal dynasty, now they started to take things into their own hands. They started to assert their power. They started to go by military methods. Until now, you see earlier, the ambassadors were sent into Mughal court, begging, very humbly requesting, etc., etc. So this method of prayer and petition was abandoned, and a more concrete policy of using military force was taken by British due to the lack of attention paid by the Mughal emperor, especially Aurangzeb. Okay. Yes. Alright. So the hostilities between English and the Mughal emperor broke out in 1686. So when British started to influence policies using their military power, they became a bit overconfident. Okay, to put it plainly, they became a bit overconfident of their might maybe, and they picked up a fight with the Mughal emperor in Bengal. Okay, they sacked Hooghly, and this actually made the emperor angry. Okay, and there was a war between Mughals and the British, and it ended disastrously for East India Company because Mughals were still very powerful. Okay, English East India Company was no match for the Mughal power at that time. Clear? So they picked up a fight at the wrong time, at the wrong place, and they suffered their consequence. But the good thing that British East India Company did was they learned from their mistakes. Unlike the Indians who never learned from their mistakes, British East India Company learned from their mistakes, and they actually went back to their initial policy of becoming humble petitioners. Okay, they understood that the time is not ripe now to take a military policy. So now let's continue diplomacy and petitions and prayers and all these things. Okay. English, though they were weak on land, their navy was very much superior to any other contemporaries in the world at that time. Okay, in 1691, the company was granted exemption from payment of customs duties in Bengal in return for 3,000 rupees a year. Okay, so through their methods of diplomacy, through their methods of petitions, they managed to gain exception from paying customs duties in Bengal by paying around 3,000 rupees a year. Okay, this was not just by the method of petition. Some kind of influence was made militarily also. What happened was, since the Britishers are the most powerful, proprietors in the sea, they were able to control all the sea trade around India. So the Mughals are powerful in land. Okay, as long as the battle takes place in land, the Mughals can beat British. But if the battle takes place in the sea, at the sea, British will win. Okay, so it was very much difficult for the Mughals to conduct a sea trade at this time. So British used their naval supremacy into basically strongholding the Mughals to grant them this exception in customs duties as far as Bengal is concerned. Later in 1698, okay, 7 years later, company acquired the zamindari of 3 villages, Sudanadi, Kaligata and Govindpur. And it is here where they construct Fort William, which is the seat of Bengal presidency, which will become the seat of Bengal presidency very soon. Okay, the earlier Fort St. George was built in Madras, which was handed to them or granted to them by a local Raja. Similarly here, in 1698, when they acquired the zamindari of Sudanadi, Kalikata and Govindpur, they established the Fort William there, and this led to the growth of the city known as Calcutta. Okay, in 1717, the companies acquired from Emperor Farrukh Siyar a farman confirming the privileges granted in 1691 and extending them to Gujarat and Deccan. So, as the Mughal dynasty deteriorates, company become more and more powerful. Farrukh Siyar was a very weak ruler. Okay, I mean the descendants of Aurangzeb were all almost very weak. Okay, so the weak rulers, had to eventually succumb to the British aspirations. Clear? So gradually British will conquer more and more territories in India or capture more and more territories in India and eventually become the supreme ruler in India. So even now, when the Mughal dynasty has started to go down, we see the rise of certain states all over India. Yesterday we talked about this, Hyderabad, Bengal, etc. etc. Okay, so these states were actually formed by very able rulers, very able statesmen, commanders, etc. etc. For example, in Bengal, the Nawabs such as Murshid Quli Khan and Alivardi Khan, these Nawabs were Shujauddin, etc. were very much powerful, very much determinant, very able statesmen. Okay, so they knew that Britishers were playing them. Clear? So what did they do? They did not allow the Britishers to misuse their privileges. They were still very strong, very able commanders. They never allowed the Britishers to misuse their privileges. Neither did they allow the British to fortify their settlements. Okay, they were not. I mean, Fort William will come eventually, but the settlements of British at the initial time in Bengal was not allowed to be fortified. Why? Because these strong rulers knew that fortifying these areas will give British some advantage, and they did not want that to happen. Okay, but despite this, you have to understand that as far as East India Company is concerned, their trade was flourishing. Okay, high amount of trade was still happening. Fortification, whether it is fortified or not, doesn't matter. Still, company was making very huge profits and making lots of money, lots of trade, etc. etc. A condition came such that in Europe there was huge demand for Indian clothes, Indian textile, that the European textile industry began to collapse. Okay, the English in England, their textile industry began to collapse, and English government had to make a new law which forbade import of Indian cotton and silk textiles to protect their own industries. That was the condition. That was the kind of trade that was happening between India and England at that time. Okay, so in India, due to these flourishing trade activities, the chief towns of trade, that is Calcutta, Bombay and Madras, all these cities started flourishing. Again, as I have mentioned earlier, these cities were very important in the sense that this was also having immediate access to the sea. That was very important. Immediate access to the sea means English is protected by their navy. Nobody can mess with them in the waters. Okay, that is the reason why these three were chosen as the presidencies, and these three cities flourished a lot due to the intercontinental trade. Yes. Okay, correct, Seema. Now let's see what was the internal organization of the company. Okay, how was this company organized? The Charter of 1600 granted the East India Company exclusive privilege of trading east of Cape of Good Hope for a period of 15 years. Very important, 15 years. It was not 20 initially, it was only 15 years. Okay, later on, the charter will become, charter will be renewed for 20 years. Okay, for example, we see Charter Act of 1813, Charter Act of 1833, 53. It goes on like that, na? So that happens every 20 years. But initially, it was given for a period of 15 years only. Okay, and the company was very strict on the matter that they allowed nobody else outside the company to conduct trade with east of Cape of Good Hope. Okay, only company personnel were allowed to trade east of Cape Good Hope. So the company was very much strict in that sense. Clear? This actually angered a lot of other merchants in England. They were angry. I mean, the plenty of resources are there available in eastern countries, and this company is monopolizing everything. We also want to trade. So they became very angry, and they became, they started to regularly complain against the company at the British Parliament or to the British King, to the British monarch. Okay. So many English merchants continued to trade in Asia. Despite this very strict policy by the English East India Company, still many private personnel managed to come into Asia and conduct trade, and the company started to call them interlopers. Okay, interlopers are those people who are not a part of the company but still British, who came to India and conducted private trade. Okay, but when the company called them interlopers, they started to call themselves as free merchants. Clear? Both are the same. They called themselves as free merchants. Company called them as interlopers. Around this time, in 1688, England witnessed a revolution. At the end of this revolution, English Parliament became very much powerful in England. I mean, English Parliament became supreme in England. Until now, it is the Crown which is the most powerful. But from now onwards, we see that the Parliament is more supreme in Britain after the revolution of 1688. So the free merchants started to complain against this company to the British Parliament. But what did the company do? Company bribed the Parliament, company bribed the British Crown, important officials, etc., etc., and still maintained their position, still maintained their monopoly in trade with Eastern Asia, or in trade with East. Okay, but despite giving these bribes and despite influencing various people, in 1694, the House of Commons means the lower house of the British Parliament, just like our Lok Sabha. Okay, so the House of Commons passed a resolution saying that all subjects of England have equal rights to trade in East Indies unless prohibited by an Act of Parliament. So this took away the monopoly of East India Company. Okay, anyone can now trade in towards East and other Asian nations. Okay, so what did the rivals of this company do? Once this act was passed, the other people, the free merchants, organized themselves into a new company known as the New Company. The name also was given as the New Company. Okay, but English East India Company, the original company, the old company, was not yet ready to give up on their profitable trade. Okay, so what did they do? They brought huge shares in the new company. Okay, they did not want to lose their trade benefits. So what did they do? They brought huge shares in the new company. Alright, so there were some exchanges, clashes, etc., etc. But finally, in 1702, these two companies decided to merge together, and thus they formed the Limited Company of Merchants of England trading to the East Indies. This is the new company which came into being when the old company and the new company merged together. Okay, and this company came into existence in 1708. Okay, so from now onwards, we see there is a single company. I mean, the two companies has merged together, and the single company will trade with east of Cape of Good Hope. Okay, now we are going to see the government and organization of companies' factories in India. Okay, how it was controlled, how was it organized, etc., etc. Okay, Jenny. All right. So a factory of the company was generally a fortified area, which had warehouses, offices, etc., etc. Okay. Normally, when we say factory, we always think about big machines. Okay, lots of laborers working around, etc., etc. But when we say a factory of English East India Company, it has nothing to do with manufacturing. Okay, it has nothing to do with manufacturing. Generally, an English East India Company's factory in India means a fortified area where company had warehouses, offices, and houses for the employees. That's all. No manufacturing happened in this factory. Okay. In general, the people who worked in the company were divided into three ranks. Okay, one is a writer, then a factor, and a merchant. And these people were paid very low income. Okay, very low income. Writer had around 10 rupees. Factors had around 10 to 40. And merchants were given around 40 rupees. So very nominal, very low income. So if you are given only such a very low, nominal income, why would you want to work in that company? Right? That's the question. People still chose to work in this company because despite having a very low salary, they knew that they can amass a huge amount of wealth through private trade. Private trade was still there. Companies' personnel engaged in private trade. Okay, so their real income came from this private trade, which was permitted at that time. This is eventually checked only in 1773 by the Regulating Act. Okay, we will study that later. But until then, the private trade was also allowed, and the personnel of the company did a lot of private trade, through which they became very much wealthy. Okay, the factory was in general administered by a person, a title known as Governor in Council. This was more of a nominal title. Okay, the real powers laid in the hands of senior merchants of the company, who actually formed the council. Okay, it depended on the majority vote. So the senior merchants of the company had the real say. The nominal president was Governor in Council. Okay, not Governor General or not the other. We have not yet come to that. Okay, the Governor of the Presidency, Governor General, etc. Those are different. This is the organizational setup of the company. Okay. So now the British has finally established their foothold in India. I already told you that there were some other European powers who were also very keen in establishing their strongholds in India. And the biggest rival for the Britain was France. Okay, France and British are, arch rivals. Okay, for a very long time, not just in India, but even between them in Europe, they were arch rivals. We know the stories of Napoleon, etc., etc. Okay, the continental system, etc. I have taken world history classes already in my unacademy classes. If you want, you can go back and watch that class to understand more about the English-French rivalries in Europe. Okay. Anyway, French also wanted to set up their stronghold in India. So in 1740s, we see there is a decline of Mughal power. Nadir Shah invaded India during the time of Muhammad Shah Rangila. So this invasion of Nadir Shah exposed the weakness of Mughal crown. Okay, so more and more autonomous Rajas started to come up. Foreign powers started to establish their strongholds here and there. Okay, so even then, we see that there is not much scope for foreign penetration in Western India and in Bengal, in Eastern India. Why? Because Western India, we see the emergence of the most powerful dynasties after Mughals, the Marathas. Okay, Marathas were a real trouble at that time, real power at that time. And because of Marathas, no foreign power was able to establish a foothold in Western India. At least, not very assertively. Similarly, in Eastern India, Bengal was ruled by people like Alivardi Khan, etc., or Murshid Quli Khan, etc., who were very able and very, energetic and enthusiastic rulers, and they prevented such exponential growth of foreign powers. But in South India, what happened was, after the death of Nizamul Mulk Asaf Jah, who founded Hyderabad, he was a very strong, able person. But after his death, plenty of weak successors came into being. Okay. Also, Hyderabad entered into a succession battle, a civil war kind of thing. Marathas regularly conducted raid upon Hyderabad. So in South India, people were one prince were in fighting with other prince, plenty of infighting, okay, treachery, betrayal, etc., etc. So it was easier for the foreign powers to enter India through south. Okay, so this entire region is known as Carnatic, and the Carnatic region was embroiled in a war of succession. Okay, after Nizam al-Mulk, who will get the power? Okay, yesterday we talked about the Nizam position, Nizam and Nawab position. Okay, the Nizam and Nawab, two positions were eventually formed. Who became Nizam, who became Nawab, etc. We saw yesterday. But for now, understand that the Carnatic was embroiled in a war of succession. And this gave the foreigners an opportunity to take control or to influence policy in South India. So France also came to India, and they also started to establish their stronghold against British. Okay, French East India Company was founded in the year 1664, and they established their company at a place called Chandranagore near Calcutta. Okay, Chandranagore near Calcutta was a French factory. English factory was in Calcutta, French factory was in Chandranagore. Okay, also they established a fort in Pondicherry. Pondicherry was also a strong French foothold. Clear. Also, they managed to capture the Mauritius Islands, Reunion Islands in Indian Ocean. So French were also a very strong, powerful power around those times. So English and French were the two important foreign rivals at that time. The problem with French factory was that it was heavily dependent on French government. British factory was entirely private. Okay, so if they wanted to take a decision, they can immediately do that. Because it's a private factory, their board of governors can actually meet together and take a decision. But French factory was a public. French company was a public company, which means every decision had to go all the way back to France, and the government has to take a decision and then come back to India. So this took a long time before a decision is taken. This was a very huge disadvantage as far as French East India Company was concerned. Okay. Also, the stakeholders in the French factory were nobles and very influential people, wealthy merchants and aristocrats in France, and they wanted to have quick profits rather than lasting commercial success. If they are investing into the French factory company, they wanted immediate profit rather than a long-term goal. These were the drawbacks of French company. Also, the French government or the French state at that time was very much autocratic, semi-feudal and unpopular, filled with corruption, inefficiency, instability. In general, pretty bad. Okay, finally in 1742, a war broke out in Europe between England and France. Okay, in 1742, a war broke out in Europe between England and France. Why? Because of two reasons. One, who will control America? Two, who will control India? Rivalry over colonies in America and India led to war in Europe between Britain and France. Okay, English company was wealthier of the two companies because they had already established their foothold, where they had already fortified, Bombay, Madras, and they also have Bengal now. Okay, so they were already very much established. They already conducted huge amounts of trade, so they were very much wealthy compared to the French factory. Okay, and their positions in India had been held longer and were better fortified and more prosperous. So British arrived to India before French did. So that advantage gained them a lot of space in the future battles. Okay, so the war in Europe between England and France soon came to India also. Obviously, in India also France and British powers are there. So the war that is going on there had its repercussions in India as well. In 1745, the English Navy captured French ships off the South Indian coast of India and threatened Pondicherry. This is how it begins in India. Okay, the English Navy, who is very much superior to the French Navy. Okay, in oceans, France is better than England. In land, in oceans, England is better than France. In land, France is better than England. Okay, so English Navy captured the French ships and threatened Pondicherry in 1745. In 1746, French retaliated. Dupleix was the French governor at India at that time. Okay, the charge of French troops in India was given to Dupleix. Dupleix was a very able statesman, brilliant commander, very much imaginative. Okay, and he attacked Madras and occupied it in 1746. Clear? British lost. British lost against Dupleix. Dupleix was one of the best in the French line. Okay, and there was nobody in English line who could compete with him. That was his personality, his kind of able to his leadership capabilities. Okay, so what did British do? British appealed to the Nawab of Karnataka. Why? Because Madras is actually a part of the territory of the Nawab of Karnataka. Okay, although British has established their factory there and is ruling those areas, still the factory at Madras is actually in the territory of Nawab of Karnataka. So when British went to the Nawab and said, okay, the French has attacked us and they have taken over Madras, Nawab thought that he should interfere. Okay, I mean he thought that I should not allow two foreign powers to fight in my territory. Okay, English and France is fighting in the Nawab's territory. This should not be allowed. And a foreign power should not be allowed to make a stronghold in his territory. So the Nawab was very decisive and he decided to intervene. Okay, so what did the Nawab do? He took a force of around 10,000 soldiers and marched into Saint Thome. Saint Thome is the battleground. Okay, at the it is in the banks of the river Adayar, and here he was met by a very small French force, around say less than 1,000 people. Okay, a Nawab's army of 10,000 plus troops against around 1,000 people from French. Problem was that the army of France was actually well trained. There were about 200 Frenchmen who were trained in Western methods using modern techniques of warfare, and then some 700 Indians also who were trained in Western way by the French troops. So a very small army in number, but a very well disciplined and very well trained army. And the battle took place and the Nawab was decisively defeated. Okay, very important. This is all the European powers actually learn a lot from this battle. So what do we learn from this battle? From this battle we can understand that rather than the numbers, a very well trained and disciplined European army, a small well trained European army can defeat a huge Indian army. Clear? So this is the lesson that is learned from this battle, and English uses this lesson throughout their rule in India. Okay, we will very soon see how Bengal is taken. Bengal is taken in the same manner only. Okay, British understood that a small well-trained European army is capable of routing a very large Indian army. Okay, so in 1748, finally after all these wars, England and France decided to enter a peace. A small peace settlement was made. But understand that this is only temporary. Okay, the very next moment they get a chance, they will fight again. So this is the first Carnatic War. Okay, so this is the end of first Carnatic War. Now, Dupleix, I already told you, was a man of strategy. He was he understood that a well-disciplined modern French force can do a lot in India. So what did he do now? He tried to interfere within Indian states. Okay, he understood that he can use the modern French army to interfere in the mutual quarrels of Indian states. Clear? In Carnatic, still wars of succession and various frantic wars were going on between small local rajas. So Dupleix decided to intervene on behalf of someone and fight with the other, thereby gaining a lot of wealth and lot of debt, etc., etc. Okay, so Indian rulers were guided not by patriotism but by narrow-minded pursuit of personal ambition and gain. You have to very focused on this point. Okay, if the Indians cared about patriotism at that time and stood united against a foreign power, maybe England and France will not have happened in India. But instead, they were much more selfish and they wanted to attain personal goods. And this blinded them to the real danger, which was the Europeans. In Carnatic, an ample opportunity came for the French forces and the British forces. In Carnatic, Chanda Sahib was pitted against the Nawab Anwaruddin. Okay, Chanda Sahib in war with Anwaruddin. Similarly, in Hyderabad, after the death of Nizam ul Mulk, a civil war broke out between his own son and his own grandson. Just think about it. Father and son are fighting a civil war. Okay, that was the pathetic condition of Hyderabad at that time after the death of Nizam ul Mulk. So here, Nasir Jang was fighting Muzaffar Jang. Nasir Jang is the son of Nizam ul Mulk and Muzaffar Jang is the grandson of Nizam ul Mulk. Okay, so Dupleix tried to intervene in among the affairs of these people. Here we see a kind of subsidiary alliance. We know that subsidiary alliance came into India, or it was the brainchild of, say, Wellesley. I mean, maybe it was given that tag by Wellesley, but a form of subsidiary alliance already was established in India, or already was practiced in India by Dupleix. Okay, so in 1749, Dupleix decided to back Chanda Sahib and Muzaffar Jang against Anwaruddin and Nasir Jang. Okay, so the French forces, Chanda Sahib and Muzaffar Jang together attacked Anwaruddin and killed him in the Battle of Ambur. Okay, in the Battle of Ambur, the French forces, okay, the coalition between the French forces, Chanda Sahib and Muzaffar Jang defeated Anwaruddin and killed him. Anwaruddin's son Muhammad Ali fled to Trichinopoli. Okay, his son fled to Trichinopoli and he was, he kept there himself safe. Okay, so the rest of Carnatic was, so after the war, territories were divided between the winners, and France also got a huge portion. The Chanda Sahib, who also emerged in the victorious side, he rewarded the French with about 80 villages around Pondicherry. So look at what is happening. France has interfered in the Indian affairs, and when they emerged victorious, they actually received a lot of territory, a lot of benefits. Initially, they did not have any foothold in India. Okay, if the war happened between Chanda Sahib and Nasir Jang, or Chanda Sahib and, say, Anwaruddin, if Chanda Sahib had won, he will get all the winners territories, etc., etc. He can keep it with himself. But by offering help, France also made sure that they had a bite in the apple. So this was the brilliant plan of Dupleix, by siding with someone and gaining a share of the victory. Okay, so thereby establishing a strong foothold for France. Similarly, in Hyderabad also, French forces were successful. Nasir Jang was killed and Muzaffar Jang became the Nizam. And when he became the Nizam, he rewarded the French company by giving territories near Pondicherry, and he also gave the famous town of Musulipatnam to the French. Dupleix was actually made the honorary governor of Mughal dominions east of river Krishna until Kanyakumari. Okay, so huge titles and huge portions of territories were given to France. France was not at all a party to this fight. Okay, Dupleix made France a party to this fight on the sole objective that in the end, when they win, they will get these kinds of benefits. Okay, so this was the shrewd tactics of Dupleix. So Dupleix stationed his best officer Bassi at Hyderabad with the French army. So this is the subsidiary alliance. Okay, I mean, it is not called subsidiary alliance yet, but a form of subsidiary alliance has already been practiced by Dupleix. Bassi was one of his trusted generals. He placed Bassi at Hyderabad along with a small French army. Muzaffar Jang was accidentally killed. Okay, on his march back to Carnatic, Muzaffar Jang was accidentally killed. So what did Bassi do? Bassi, towards Hyderabad, okay, not Carnatic. So what did Bassi do? Bassi immediately raised Salabat Jang, the third son of Nizam ul Mulk, to the throne. Okay, Muzaffar Jang was not assassinated or anything. It was an accident and he died. So Bassi, who was in the Hyderabad capital, what did he do? He immediately raised the third son of Nizam ul Mulk, who is Salabat Jang, to the throne. Okay, so in return, what did Nizam do? It was the French general who raised him to the throne, right? Who backed him to the throne. So he has to be rewarded. So Nizam gave huge portions of Andhra, known as the Northern Sarkars, consisting of the districts of Mustafanagar, Ellur, Rajamundry and Chikkakol to France. See, by intervening in the accession and internal affairs of the state, France is the one actually benefiting. Indian rulers are still blind to all this. They wanted power for themselves, and they turned a blind eye, or they were too busy with their own self-interest that they did not see actually what was going on. France was the only person who was only power that was benefiting from the infighting in Carnatic. Okay, so what was the British doing all this time? Were they silent? No, the opposition was in the hands of British. When Dupleix decided to back Chanda Sahib and Muzaffar Jung, English backed Nasir Jung and Muhammad Ali. Okay, Robert Clive right now, around the time of Carnatic Wars, was actually only a clerk in the company service. Okay, later he became the governor and all, but now Robert Clive is only a humble clerk in the company. So he came up with an idea that if they attacked our court, okay, if British attacked our court, French will have to take away their pressure from Muhammad Ali. Earlier I told you in the previous slide that Muhammad Ali, here the latter son Muhammad Ali had fled to Trichinopoli. Okay, and Trichinopoli was besieged by France. Okay, the ruler's son was still alive. He could claim power anytime. So in order to prevent that, French had besieged Trichinopoli. Robert Clive came with the idea that if they attacked Arcot was the capital of Carnatic. So if the capital was attacked, French troops will have to abandon the besiege in Trichinopoli and they will come to Arcot to reclaim their capital. And this idea actually worked. Okay, they attacked Arcot, and if Chanda Sahib and French were compelled to raise the siege of Trichinopoli, and they had to come back to Arcot. But the French forces were thoroughly defeated, and Chanda Sahib was caught and killed by the English army. Okay, English were very much powerful. They were competent enough to attack France, and they managed to defeat French forces repeatedly and also capture and kill Chanda Sahib. Okay, French government at this time was very wary of the expense that was causing all these wars. Okay, earlier I told you the French company was invested into by nobles, aristocrats, etc., who wanted quick profits. But these wars were actually costing them a lot. They did not have long-term visions or goals. They wanted immediate quick profits. Okay, so they were wary of the expense of the war, and they decided to also French were facing some reversals in American colonies. So they started a peace negotiation in 1754 and arrived at a peaceful conclusion with Britain on the condition that Dupleix will be recalled to France. Okay, Dupleix was the visionary for France in India. Okay, everything the France earned in India was Dupleix. So English also knew that Dupleix was the major trouble. Okay, without Dupleix, French forces can easily be rooted out. So British demanded that we will also sue for peace on the condition that Dupleix will be recalled. And the French government, who did not want to continue the wars, accepted this peace treaty and called back Dupleix. In 1756, another war broke out in Europe between England and France. Okay, French government made determined attempts this time to out English from India and send a very strong force under Count de Lally. Okay, Dupleix was replaced by some other governors, French governors, and here during this battle it was Count de Lally. Okay, sent a very huge force under him, but he lost. Okay, he was not Dupleix, so he lost, and British emerged victorious. English actually now replaced the French as the Nizam's protectors and secured from him Masulipatanam and Northern Circas. Earlier, Masulipatanam and Northern Circas were granted to France by the Nizam. But now, when the French were defeated, British got all these provinces. And finally, in the Battle of Vandivash, this one is the second Battle of Carnatic, and between the Chanda Sahib, etc., that's the second Battle of Carnatic. And this one, in the final battle between England and France in the Carnatic region, known as the Third Battle of Carnatic, happened around 1760. Okay, in this battle, in a very decisive battle in 22nd of January 1760, General Henri Court defeated Lally. Henri Court of England defeated Lally of France. Okay, and within a very short period of time, France lost all their possessions in India, and finally in 1763 they signed the Treaty of Paris. According to this treaty, all the French factories in India were restored to the France, but they were not allowed to fortify. They cannot even place a proper garrison in these factories. Okay, it is the Battle of Vendivash, a very decisive battle in history, very important battle as well, in the sense that this battle ended the ambitions of France in India. Okay, from now onwards, England is British is the supreme power in India. Okay, their main rival France has been routed out. So they can, be very careful here. After this battle, they did not take the French possessions. British did not attach the French possessions. They gave that to France only, on the condition that it will never be fortified and no proper garrisons will be kept in these factories. Okay, so what was going on in India at this time, or what led to all these things? If Indians stood together against the foreign power, maybe this won't have happened. So what were the causes that led to all these things? Primarily, absence of nationalism in the country. Everybody was fighting for their own personal goals. There is no feeling of India. Okay, India did not exist at that time. Small local petty rajas fought for their own personal interests and never stood together as one. So lack of that nationalism was a detrimental factor. Western trained infantry with modern weapons backed by artillery. Already told you, in the first battle of Carnatic, we saw how Nawab's army of 10,000 has been destroyed by Dupleix, by a mere army of 1,000, well-trained European army. Okay, so that is another point. Indian soldier trained in European manner also made a very good soldier. These soldiers were eventually called as Sepoys. Okay, the Sepoy army. We study about Sepoy mutiny in 1857. So Sepoy is a Indian soldier who is trained in European methods. Okay, so Europeans understood that they did not have to bring huge army from Europe all the way to India. Rather, they can recruit from Indians alone, because they will fight for Europeans if they are properly paid. Okay, there is no feeling of nationalism. Okay, so if they are paid more money and more, if they are happy, then they will fight for anybody. They can be bought. Okay, if they had the sense of nationalism, they cannot be bought. Right now, if some other country tried to buy an Indian soldier, that won't happen, because now we have the sense of unity, we have the sense of India. But at that time, it was not there. It was like a mercenary army. Whoever pays more, that person will go to them. So the lack of nationalism also was a detrimental factor. So this is how European powers came to India, and finally British managed to oust all the other powers and establish themselves as the supreme power in India. So their foothold is in Carnatic right now. Very soon we will see that they also capture Bengal, and from there they defeat Mughals, and then the entirety of India. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 3, and we are looking into one more chapter today, that is chapter 4, the British conquest of India. Okay, I am taking huge lesson in one day. I know that this will be a bit too much for you, so if you want, you can stop it here and come back and watch the rest of the video later. Okay, if you feel saturated, you can watch the rest of the video later. But I am taking this anyway, because UPSC exam is only like 3 months away, and my classes are on alternate days, and I don't want you to take this. I don't want to complete this nearer to the exam. I want to complete this as quick as I can, so that you can study and revise more and more. Okay, so chapter 4, the British conquest of India. Okay, Jenny is here, Vasanta Lakshmi is here. Alright, so British occupation of Bengal. Okay, so now British has the Carnatic. Peninsular India, apart from Mysore and Marathas, are in the hands of Britain. Okay, Carnatic is under the British hands. Now we see how British occupied Bengal. Already they have got some farmans, etc., etc. They have established Calcutta. They have Fort William. Okay, so Bengal was the most fertile and the richest of Indian provinces. This is what attracted British to Bengal. most fertile. It is, plenty of rivers flow through that. We have the Brahmaputra, Ganga, Doab there, the delta, etc., deltaic region, very fertile alluvial soil, good for agriculture, productive. Okay, so this richness of Bengal attracted British to Bengal. Also, as yesterday when I was teaching you about the rise of these states, I told you Bengal had a long period of peace under three very efficient rulers, Murshid Quli Khan, then Shujauddin and Alivardi Khan. Okay, Murshid Quli Khan, Shujauddin and Alivardi Khan. These three rulers were able to give a long period of peace in Bengal, and this actually led to the economic enhancement or the flourishing economy in Bengal. Unlike in Carnatic, it was always war with each other, which hindered or hampered trade and prosperity. Okay, so in 1717, a royal farman by Mughal emperor was given, and based on this farman, British earned the freedom to export and import their goods in Bengal without paying taxes, and also got the right to issue passes or dastaks. So using this farman, they have the freedom to export and import goods in Bengal without paying taxes. Okay, also they were given the right to issue dastaks. So what is a dastak? Dastak is a kind of pass. Okay, whoever has this dastak can trade with Bengal in and out without paying extra duty or anything. Okay, but without dastak, that person will have to pay huge amounts as taxes, etc., etc., etc. So by obtaining the right to issue these dastaks, British started to control the trade in Bengal to a huge extent. Also, they misused dastaks. Dastaks was actually granted to the company. Okay, company. It was the company, the English East India Company, which was exempted from trade, taxes, not private trade. British private trade was not exempted from taxes. They were still supposed to give taxes, but the company officials who were engaged in private trade did not pay taxes. Okay, they interpreted the farman in a way that their private trade was also exempted from taxes. They also started misusing dastaks. Okay, so this actually started to have a huge negative impact on Indian merchants. Europeans are now getting everything for free. They do not have to pay taxes. Okay, so this actually started to hinder Indian merchants, the native merchants. Okay, during the time of strong and able Nawabs such as Murshid Quli Khan or Alivardi Khan, they were able to make sure that the farmans were not misused. I mean, they were pretty strong. They had a very formidable army, so they could put the British in line. Okay, but after that time, when weak rulers started to come into throne, they were not able to continue this. Okay, for example, after the time of Alivardi Khan, his grandson Sirajuddaulah came to power. Sirajuddaulah was a very able personality. Okay, he was very powerful ruler, very ambitious. I mean, a very good administrator, pretty good military commander. Problem was that he always took actions out of haste. He never gave proper thought or anything. He always did whatever he wanted in a very hasty fashion, and this proved to be very much harmful to his rule. So what happened? The young Nawab always suspected the company was hostile to him and was favoring his rivals for the throne of Bengal. Okay, Sirajuddaulah was actually not happy with English East India Company. When he came to power, he suspected that the company is actually, conspiring against him. Okay, and without obtaining Sirajuddaullah's permission, English East India Company started to fortify their possessions in Bengal. Okay, earlier Alivardi Khan has prevented this from happening, but now, even without obtaining permission from the Nawab Sirajuddaulah, English East India Company started fortifying their English settlement in Bengal. Okay, so Sirajuddaulah now was very angry because he rightfully interpreted this as an attack on his sovereignty. Correct, right? A foreign factory is fortifying their settlement in India without obtaining permission from the Indian ruler. So that is clearly violation of his sovereignty. So Sirajuddaulah was very much angry with this, and he gave an order based on which both English and the French factories should immediately remove their fortifications. So English factory was at Calcutta, French factory was at Chandranagore. So both of them were ordered to remove their fortifications immediately. French obeyed this. Okay, French, demolished their fortifications at Chandranagore, but English East India Company did not obey the order. English company refused to obey the order. So what did Sirajuddaulah do? He immediately seized the English factory at Qasim Bazar, marched towards Calcutta, and occupied Fort William on 20th June 1756. Okay, rather than giving it a thought or anything, he immediately took an army, attacked British factory at Qasim Bazar, conquered it, then marched to Calcutta and to occupy the Fort William, which is the seat of English power in Calcutta, in Bengal. Okay, so English army was lost. I mean, they lost the battle in 1756. So instead of actually thoroughly defeating England, and instead of consolidating his power and making sure that further retaliations will not happen, he retired to Calcutta and started to celebrate his victory. Okay, he should have pursued English and made sure to imprison them or make a treaty with them or something like that. But rather than that, he allowed the British forces to escape. This was a blunder. Why? Because British fled towards the sea. Because they are supreme at the sea. There is no power in India who can compete with the British in the sea. So they went to Fulta, area known as Fulta. Fulta is a nearby area which is protected by the naval superiority of Britain. Okay, so the British army escaped to Fulta. And there they waited for reinforcements to come from Madras. Madras was a strong, in Carnatic, British has already established their power. Okay, so they waited in Fulta for reinforcements to come from Carnatic or from Madras. Okay, at the same time, they was not, sitting idle. They actually tried to bribe and, try to get some of Nawab's people into their own, plans. Okay, they tried to betray Nawab with his own people. Clear? And this worked. This is where India or Indians actually fail. Okay, if all stood together, if everybody had supported Sirajuddaulah, maybe Battle of Plassey would have had a different result. But his own ministers betrayed him. The chief betrayers of Sirajuddaulah included Mir Jafar, his own minister, the Mir Bakshi, Manik Chand, the officer in charge of Calcutta, Ami Chand, a very rich merchant, Jagat Seth, the biggest banker in Bengal, and Khadim Khan, who commanded a large number of Nawab's troops. So look at this. Major powerful personalities who had money, who had army, etc. betrayed the Nawab when it was most necessary. They did this for their own selfish goals. Okay, so after a while, after waiting in Fulta, finally their reinforcements came from Madras under the commandership of Admiral Watson and Colonel Robert Clive. Okay, Watson and Clive finally reached Bengal. And in 23rd June 1757, the Battle of Plassey happened, and it was actually a battle only in the name. Okay, it was only a battle in name. It was never really a battle. It ended before it started, in a way. Okay, a major part of Nawab's army, led by the traitors Mir Jafar and Rai Durlab, took no part in the fight at all. Only a very small portion of the Nawab's army, which was led by Mir Madan and Mohanlal, actively, sincerely fought the battle against British. Others betrayed the Nawab. So even before it began, it was over. Okay, so it was a battle only in name. The Nawab was forced to flee and was captured and put to death by Mir Jafar's son, Miran. So it was Miran who finally killed Sirajuddaulah. Okay, so the English proclaimed Mir Jafar as the Nawab of Bengal. So now English is going to do what France did in Carnatic. English backed Mir Jafar, or English placed Mir Jafar in the throne. In return, they asked for something. So Mir Jafar was forced to concede a lot of things to Britain. Okay, the company was granted undisputed trade rights for free trade in Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, very rich areas of India. Okay, they were given unrestricted trade access to these three provinces by Mir Jafar. Company received the zamindari of 24 paraganas near Calcutta, another very productive area. Also, Mir Jafar paid a sum of 17.7 million rupees to the company. So see what's happening. In return for meddling with Indian affairs, actually British is getting all the revenue. Okay, this is just like France in Carnatic. British also played the same card in Bengal and they got all these profits. So the real winner here is Britain, none of the Indian forces. Okay, it was Sirajuddaula lost his life. The puppet ruler is Mir Qasim. He thought that he won the war, but it was actually Britain who was in power, not him. And he understood this folly very quickly. Okay, why? Because directors of the company ordered that Bengal should pay the expenses of Bombay and Madras presidencies and purchase out of its revenue all the company's exports from India. Okay, until now, British actually paid their expenses in India using the money they bring from England or from Europe. But from now onwards, the richness of Bengal is being used to pay for British exports, which means now from this point onwards, it is a one-way trade. The drain has started. Okay, the money which is used to pay the exports is also from India. So India is losing and Britain is gaining. The drain has started. Clear? So Mir Jafar understood the folly. Okay, so he understood what is actually going on, and he understood that this cannot be allowed. So on October 1760, finally there were plenty of clashes between Mir Jafar and the company, and the company decided to replace Mir Jafar with someone else. And Mir Jafar couldn't do anything. Why? Because he was merely a puppet. British was actually in control. So instead of Mir Jafar, the company actually forced Mir Jafar to abdicate in favor of his son-in-law, Mir Qasim. And when Mir Qasim was put in the power by the company, he also paid a huge reward to the company in the form of zamindari of the districts of Burdwan, Midnapur and Chittagong, and giving handsome presents totaling 29 lakhs of rupees to the English officials. Okay, Robert Clive was given a huge amount. Admiral Watson was given a huge amount. Okay, so when a new ruler has been installed in the throne, he also gave huge indemnities and huge prizes and gifts to the British. So again, British is benefiting, Indians are losing. But Mir Qasim was also not happy with what England is doing. Okay, he thought that, okay, now English has helped me into the throne. I have paid my gifts and rewards and all. Now I don't owe them anything. Now English should allow me to rule on my own capacity. Okay, but the English was not ready to do that. So Mir Qasim started to establish his own authority, or at least tried to establish his own authority. He tried to prevent public disorder. He tried to increase his income by removing corruption from revenue administration. He started to modernize the army in European lines. Okay, he tried to attempt to check the misuse of dastak and the royal farman. Okay, so all these measures that was taken by Mir Qasim started to anger the English East India Company. They did not like this. Why? Because it is hindering their trade. If the misuse of dastaks are stopped, then it is the company's officials who are going to lose. Okay, it was the East India Company who was making profit out of all these things, and if all these things are stopped, they only will lose. So company was becoming angry about the way Mir Qasim was ruling. Finally, what did Mir Qasim do now? He abolished tax throughout Bengal. Earlier, British East India Company was allowed to trade in Bengal without paying taxes. Correct? But Indians had to pay taxes. So in order to create a level playing field, Mir Qasim abolished taxes for Indians also. So nobody has to pay tax. Now Indians and Europeans can, compete in a level, a level field. Okay, but the company did not like this. Company wanted that concession all for itself. They did not like the idea of competing on equal terms with Indians. Okay, so they engaged in a war with Mir Qasim. Mir Qasim was defeated in a series of battles in 1763 and he fled to Oudh, where he formed an alliance with the exiled Mughal ruler Shah Alam II and the ruler of Oudh, Shuja-ud Dawla. So Shuja-ud Dawla, Shah Alam II and Mir Qasim together formed an alliance and battled English East India Company at a place called Buxar. And that is the historic battle of Buxar that happened in 1764, October 22nd. And this was one of the most decisive battles of Indian history. In the sense that after this battle, English has clearly established their superiority all over India, because the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam is also a party to this battle, and he was also defeated. Okay, so in 1763, the British had restored Mir Jafar as the Nawab. So Mir Qasim lost in the Battle of Buxar. So again, Mir Jafar was brought back to power by English East India Company. And when this was done, huge sum was collected by the company and its high officials. Okay, on Mir Jafar's death, they placed his second son, Nizamuddin onto the throne, and as a reward made him sign a new treaty on 20th February 1765. Okay, so now it is not, there is no natural line of succession or anything. British will decide who will come to throne next. That's it. So they placed Mir Jafar. When he died, they placed Nizamuddin. It was all the decision of East India Company that was being executed. Everybody else were just puppets. Nawab was to disband most of his army and to administer Bengal through a deputy Subedar who was to be nominated by the company and who could not be dismissed without its approval. Okay, Nawab has to administer Bengal as a Bengal through a deputy Subedar, and this deputy Subedar was actually appointed by English East India Company, and he cannot be removed without the permission of East India Company, which basically means this function, the Nizamat function, is in the hands of English East India Company. Okay, Nizamat means law and order functions. Okay, now it is in the hands of English East India Company. Company also secured the Diwani, or the right to collect revenue from Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. We saw this earlier. Okay, so both Diwani rights, that is a right to collect revenue, and the Nizamat right, the policing functions, are in the hands of company. Okay, so in modern terms, we can say that the Chief Secretary and DGP, okay, Chief Secretary who is in the revenue field, and Director General of Police, who is the highest authority of police, both are now company's people. In effect, that province is ruled by the company. Both Nizamat functions and Diwani functions are under its hands. Okay, in return, okay, they took the English East India Company took all these from the Nawab. So in return also they granted something. What is that? Company gave him a subsidy of 26 lakhs rupees and secured for him the districts of Gora and Allahabad. The emperor resided in the fort of Allahabad for 6 years as a virtual prisoner of English. We talked about this in the last class. Mughal Emperor Shah Alam was made into a prisoner, okay, a kind of pensioner, and he was forced to stay in Allahabad for a very long time, for 6 years. Finally, with the help of Marathas, he escaped into Delhi and tried to establish himself again. But in 1803, again English East India Company will rout out the Marathas and the Nawab, and the Mughal Emperor, and capture Delhi. This is what happened in 1803. Anyway, the Nawab of Oudh, Shujauddaulah, was made to pay a war indemnity of 5 million rupees to the company. Moreover, the two signed an alliance by which the company promised to support Nawab against an outside attack, provided he paid for the services of the troops of his land. Okay, for English, Oudh acted as a buffer state. Okay, as a barrier between their possessions in Bengal and the Marathas. So Marathas were the only power in India that could actually fight with Britain at this point. Okay, in Carnatic region, in South Indian region, Marathas and Mysore's are still there. Maratha force and Mysorean force are still there, but Marathas were the most powerful. So though they were the only force that the British were afraid of at this point of time, or at least concerned about at this point of time. So by capturing Oudh, what did they do? They effectively created a buffer state between the Marathas and their English possessions in Bengal. So Marathas cannot directly attack Bengal. They have to attack Oudh first and then come to Bengal. So by that time, England can do, whatever they want to do. Okay, so that was the intention in capturing or annexing or taking control of Oudh. Later we will see that they actually annex Oudh also. That we will see in the doctrine of lapse policy, that was not as a part of doctrine of lapse, but Dalhousie manages to annex Oudh also during his reign. That also we will see today towards the end of this session. Okay, so basically the Nizamat function and the Diwani functions are in the hands of company. Alright, continuing. No questions so far, so I'm continuing. So the Diwani function and the Nizamat function are now both in the hands of English East India Company. Okay. The interesting thing here is that now the English East India Company has power without responsibility. Okay, they have the Nizamat functions, they have the Diwani functions, but still Nawab was the responsible ruler. Okay, so Nawab did not had any power in his hands, but he was responsible for everything. So if people has some issues with the rule, they have to take it up with the Nawab. But the English had all the power, but no responsibility. This was the condition in Bengal, and this system of governance is known as the dual system of administration. Two power centers, one is Nawab and other is English East India Company. English East India Company had the power without responsibility, and Nawab had responsibility and no power. Responsibility without power. This was the condition. Okay, and this is known as the dual system of administration. Neither the company. What was the drawback of this system? The major drawback is that the people are the persons who actually suffer, because Nawab do not have any power to implement anything. Okay, and the company do not have any kind of responsibility. So neither of them cared about the people. Even if the Nawab cared about the people, he couldn't do anything because he do not have the power. So people's welfare was going downwards. Clear? So company also stopped sending money from England to purchase Indian goods. Instead, they purchased these goods from the revenues of Bengal and sold them abroad. And this was known as company's investment. They used their profits within Bengal to pay for the goods in Bengal. Okay, so they, instead of bringing money from England, they started to purchase whatever they want using the money or revenue they gained from Bengal itself. And this was, nicknamed as company's investment. And millions were drained from Bengal. In 1770, Bengal suffered a famine. Okay, this was due to the lack of rain and all. But the policy of British administration in Bengal also was very much detrimental to the people's condition during this famine. Around 1/3 of Bengal population had to pay victim for the Bengal famine. Okay, one of the biggest famines we see in Indian history happened in 1770 in Bengal. Now, wars under Warren Hastings and Cornwallis. So now Bengal is in the hands of Britain. Okay, so in 1766, what happened was, English East India Company entered into an alliance with the Nizam of Hyderabad. Okay, Hyder Ali was causing trouble to Nizam of Hyderabad. In South India, Carnatic was in the hands of Britain. So other important states were Mysore and Marathas. Okay, so Nizam of Hyderabad was facing constant raids from Mysore army under Hyder Ali. So English used this as an opportunity to interfere there. So they offered help to the Nizam of Hyderabad in return for cessation of northern Sarkars. Northern Sarkars were to be given. This was the alliance treaty. Okay. Anyway, English East India Company helped Nizam against Hyder Ali, and a battle happened. Okay, this battle is known as the First Anglo-Mysore War. Okay, in the First Anglo-Mysore War, Hyder Ali defeated British and Nizam's forces, and helped by the British. Okay, Hyder Ali was very much more than expected what was expected by British East India Company, and Hyder Ali managed to defeat the British attack, and he even threatened Madras in 1769 and forced the Madras Council to sign peace on his terms. That was the capability of Hyder Ali. Hyder Ali started as a very humble person in Mysore. He was uneducated, but he was brilliant and very much good as a statesman and as a commander. Okay, he defeated English East India Company's army along with that of Nizam. And the first Anglo-Mysore War was won by Mysoreans. At the end of the war, a treaty was reached based on which both sides restored each other's conquest, and promised to help each other in case of a third-party attack. Okay, Hyder Ali gave back all the territories he conquered in the war. British gave back the territories that they conquered, and they promised each other that if a third party attacked them, they will stand united against the third party. British never, took this seriously. Okay, because very soon we will see that Hyder Ali was attacked by the Marathas in 1771, and British was nowhere in the sea. Okay, British, although they promised Hyder Ali help against a third party, they did not come to the aid of Hyder Ali when Marathas attacked. In 1775, there was a clash between English and Marathas. Okay, Peshwa Madhav II, who was actually led by Nana Fadnis. Okay, yesterday we saw about this, Nana Fadnis, against Raghunath Rao. A succession battle was going on between Madhav Rao II and Raghunath Rao. Okay, and British officials decided to back Raghunath Rao. Alright, Marathas defeated the British forces at Talegaon and forced them to sign a convention of Badgaon. Okay, Marathas defeated British. Earlier, Mysore defeated British in the first Anglo-Mysore War. Now here, Marathas defeated British as well. Okay, Marathas were that much powerful at that time. Okay, and after they won this battle, Marathas made sure that English renounced all their conquests and gave up the cause of Raghunath Rao. English will not back Raghunath Rao ever again. That was the condition. Okay, but this treaty was also, this peace was also temporary. Very soon, the second war happened. In the second war, all the Maratha chiefs stood united behind the Peshwa and the chief minister Nana Fadnis. Okay, Marathas, although they were divided into various families, Scindias, Holkars, all these different 5 families are there: Peshwas, Scindias, Holkars, etc., etc., Gaikwads. Okay, they stood united against British. Not only did Marathas came united, Hyder Ali and the Nizam also chose to fight against the company at this time. So the formidable powers in India at that time, Marathas and Mysore, along with Nizam, are now together against English East India Company. This was something that was required a long time earlier. Okay, but at least better later than never, this happened. Okay, the brilliant, energetic and experienced Governor General Warren Hastings was appointed in India around this time. Okay, Warren Hastings was appointed around this time, and he was able to hold against the might of these 3 Indian powers. Okay, because of his able leadership and all, British East India Company managed to hold against Marathas, Mysore and the Nizam. Neither side won anything in the war. It was a impasse. It was a standstill. And finally, on 1782, the Treaty of Salbai was signed, based on which status quo was maintained, and this is the end of First Anglo-Maratha War. First Anglo-Maratha War ended with the Treaty of Salbai. Okay, yeah, correct, Seema, correct. Alright, so we might think that this is good for India also. Okay, we might, according to the Treaty of Salbai, 20 years of peace was guaranteed between Marathas and British. Okay, we might think this is actually good, but it turned out to be good for Britain, while it turned out to be bad for Indians. Why? Because Marathas were the most powerful power in India at that time, and British has managed to attain 20 years of peace with this power, which means they do not have to be afraid of Marathas for next 20 years. They can plan and attack any other region in India as they wanted. Marathas won't interfere. Okay, and Marathas too could have benefited from this if they planned accordingly and had a long-term vision. But what did they do? They used up this time for internal fighting. Okay, the common enemy has gone, so it's time for internal fight. Clear? So, the next 20 years after the 20 years of peace, British emerged as a superpower and Marathas disintegrated themselves. Clear? So, also Marathas has promised the British on recovering territories from Hyder Ali. Anyway, Hyder Ali again inflicted defeat one after another on the British armies. And Hyder Ali very soon occupied almost the whole of Karnataka. Okay, now again, after suing peace with Marathas, British started to focus more onto Hyder Ali in conquering Mysore. Okay, but Hyder Ali was, still no match for the British. Hyder Ali was way ahead. Okay, he managed to defeat British again and again, and he almost conquered the whole of Karnataka all by himself. Warren Hastings bribed the Nizam with the cessation of Guntur district and gained his withdrawal from the anti-British alliance. So this anti-British alliance had Marathas, had the Nizam of Hyderabad, and had Hyder Ali. Marathas were removed from this alliance using the Treaty of Salbai. This is British diplomacy at work. The brilliant mind of Warren Hastings. Okay, so Marathas are removed. Nizam also was removed by granting him the province of Guntur. So Nizam is also out. Now it is only Hyder Ali. Okay, only Mysore remaining. So British can focus all their army into Mysore. Brilliant, na? This is the able commandership of Warren Hastings. Okay, so during 1781-82, he made peace with Marathas and thus freed a large part of his army against Mysore. In July 1781, the British army under Colonel Iry Coote defeated Hyder Ali at Porto Novo and saved Madras. Finally, when the entire British might was put behind attacking Hyder Ali was defeated at Porto Novo and finally Iry Coote took back Madras. Okay, Hyder Ali soon died in 1782. The very next year, Hyder Ali died. He was followed by his son Tipu Sultan. Okay, Tipu Sultan continued this second Anglo-Mysore war. Okay, but the problem was that nobody was winning. Okay, neither the English was winning nor the Mysoreans were winning. So they decided to, stop the war, conclude peace, and restore everything back to each other. So the second Mysore war, Anglo-Mysore war, was also non-decisive. It ended in a drawish position, with no clear winner. Alright, but even though peace was sued, English East India Company did not like Tipu. Okay, they were always suspicious about Tipu because Tipu had a good alliance with France. We already saw this yesterday. He planted the Tree of Liberty at Srirangapatnam. He joined the Jacobin Club. He used the French help to train his army. All these actually started to irritate the English East India Company. So they considered Tipu Sultan as a formidable rival in South and as their chief enemy. Okay, so a third battle happened. The third Anglo-Mysore war happened in 1789 and ended in Tipu Sultan's defeat in 1792. Lord Cornwallis, the Governor-General, succeeded in the shrewd diplomacy in isolating him by winning over Marathas and Nizam and the rulers of Travancore and Coorg. This is what English always did. Okay, to defeat an Indian power, English made sure that they had removed all his allies and isolated them. Indians never learned from this. Okay, if the Indians stood united against British, even now British could have been effectively restricted. But even in this period of time, Indians are fighting with each other. So Nizam, was out from the anti-British alliance. Marathas were also moving out. Travancore Rajas also did not help Tipu Sultan, and he was all alone in the third Anglo-Mysore war. And in this decisive war, ended with the Treaty of Srirangapatnam. Okay, the Treaty of Srirangapatnam was signed at the end of the third Anglo-Mysore war, in which Tipu Sultan was decisively defeated by British under Lord Cornwallis. That was the kind of shrewd diplomacy which Lord Cornwallis put forth. This is one of the reasons why British had a strong foothold in India. Their governor-generals were extremely good. Okay, against their Indian counterparts, their governor-general had that vision. Okay, had that long-term strategy. Indians were still fighting for temporary gains and selfish purposes. Clear? Anyway, according to Treaty of Srirangapatnam, Tipu ceded half of his territories to the Allies and paid 330 lakhs of rupees as indemnity, and thus concluded the third Anglo-Mysore war. There is one more Anglo-Mysore war. Okay, we will look into that as well here. Expansion under Lord Wellesley. 1798. Okay, till then, British followed a policy of gaining resources in India and attacking an Indian power only if it is profitable for them. Okay, they won't attack or they won't join a war unless it is profitable for them. Consolidating their position and making profits, that was the sole aim of the company until 1798. By 1797, the previous year, the two strongest Indian powers, Mysore and Marathas, had declined. Okay, by suing for 20 years of peace with Marathas, British started to enhance their power, and Marathas, because of their infighting, declined. And because Mysore was isolated from other Indian powers. After the Third Anglo-Mysore War, Mysore also declined. Okay, now the political condition in India was extremely, favorable for English East India Company. Okay, now they can afford to go for aggressive strategy. They can bring in army now because there is no power in India which can effectively stop them now. There is one in the north, that is Punjab. Okay, the Sikh kingdom. The Punjab is still there, but other than that, in the Indian peninsular India, there is no power who can effectively put a fight against Britain. Clear? So trading and industrial classes of Britain also wanted further expansion. So in England, this trade was, the trade between England and India was going on, and England was dumping lot of manufactured goods into India. In order to have a bigger market, they wanted more expansion. Correct? Otherwise, if the British did not control that territory, then they will have to pay extra taxes, etc., to dump their goods in that particular province. Now, so British East India Company, the British government, the merchants, everybody favored expansion. So the more territory is under the control of Britain, they can trade more profitably. Okay, so now that was the scenario, that was the situation, and this is when Lord Wellesley comes to India. In 1798, Wellesley came to India and he made this policy of expansion very prime to his objectives. And he used three methods to do this: subsidiary alliance, outright wars, and assumption of territories of previously subordinated rulers. Okay, subsidiary alliance we will look into detail. What is outright war? Outright war means nothing, picking up a war with someone else, defeating them and annexing the territory. That is outright war method. Third one, assumption of territories of previously subordinated rulers. Already some rulers are now mere puppets in the hands of Britain. Now, so they are already puppets. Now they are, the puppet ruler is removed and company takes the territory all by itself. This is the third strategy. Okay, first strategy, the subsidiary alliance, that we have to look into in detail. So what is subsidiary alliance? We already saw that Dupleix tried a form of subsidiary alliance earlier very successfully in India, and this system was actually established in its name by none other than Lord Wellesley. Yeah, Seema, correct? Okay, so what is this subsidiary alliance system? The ruler of the allying Indian state was compelled to accept the permanent stationing of a British force within his territory and to pay a subsidiary for its maintenance. The ruler who accepts the subsidiary alliance system has to maintain a force of or a British army in his capital, in his residence. And the payment of this army also should be made by the ruler only. This is the subsidiary alliance system. Okay, Indian ruler would agree to the posting at his court a British resident. Not only that, he has to allow a permanent British army in his capital, he also has to allow a British resident in his court permanently. He would not employ any European in his service without approval of British. Okay, he would not negotiate with any other Indian ruler without consulting the Governor General. Clear? British undertook to defend the ruler from his enemies, promised non-interference in the internal affairs of the allied state. This is a joke. Okay, British undertook to defend the ruler against his enemies. That is fine, because now this ruler is a puppet in English hands. So basically this territory is now with Britain. So Britain will defend this territory against anyone else because it's their own territory now, in effect. Second part of the statement is a joke. Promised non-interference in the internal affairs of the allied state. British never followed this. Okay, they placed the army in the capital and they placed a resident in the court in order to make sure that they interfered with everything that is going on in the internal affairs of the state. Okay, that was the entire point of subsidiary alliance, to meddle with the internal affairs of Indian states by offering them something superficial. Clear? And this led to the dismemberment of armies of the protected states. So when the English army was placed in the capital, the ruler's army was supposed to be disbanded, and lots of people who were employed in the army of the ruler lost their jobs. So mass scale of joblessness also happened around this time. Clear? So look at this once more. Look at these points. Here, by allowing a British army to be stationed in the ruler's capital, the ruler has effectively given away the sovereignty. Correct? Sovereignty has been effectively given away. Indian ruler would agree to posting at his court of a British resident. Again, Sovereignty is given away. He would not employ any European in his service without approval of British. Similarly, he would not negotiate with any other Indian ruler without consulting the Governor General. His diplomatic power, his foreign relations has hereby given to Britain. So sovereignty, diplomacy, everything has been handed over to Britain by the system of subsidiary alliance. Clear? So British very skillfully took control of Indian territories one by one. The ruler of the protected states tended to neglect their interests of their people and to oppress them as they no longer feared. So now the ruler of that state can do anything that they want, because even if the people like them or not, it doesn't matter. British will protect them against any kind of rebellions. So they started to care less and less about their own people, and they even started to oppress them. People can't do anything. Why? Because if people start a rebellion, they will be answering to the British army. There is no way they can stand against that army. Okay, so the first province in which Wellesley put the subsidiary alliance was Hyderabad. 1798, Hyderabad was the first province which came under subsidiary alliance of Lord Wellesley. Clear? And Nawab of Oudh was also forced to sign the subsidiary alliance in 1801. Okay, and in return, he had to give large parts of his territory, surrender a large portion of his force, etc., etc. And British, he also had to cede away Rohilkhand and the territory lying between Ganga and Yamuna. The area between Ganga and Jamuna are extremely fertile lands, highly productive, and this had to be given away to the British in order for the subsidiary alliance to work. Okay, so these basically British employed various tactics to conquer Indian territories one by one. Now, Wellesley dealt with Mysore, Carnatic, Tanjore, and Surat, and even more sternly. Okay, now one by one, everything is becoming in the hands of Britain. So now we see the fourth Anglo-Mysore War. Tipu Sultan, although decisively defeated in the third Anglo-Mysore War, was not, ready to give up until now. Tipu Sultan will by no means accept subsidiary alliance. Okay, he was a very proud personality. He wanted to defend Mysore against Britain, so he will never accept subsidiary alliance. So this actually eventually went for fourth Anglo-Mysore War. Tipu Sultan sent help for France. Okay, they request for help from France, from the revolutionary France. Problem was, before the French forces could arrive in India, Wellesley defeated Tipu Sultan in a fierce war in 1799. Before French help could reach Tipu Sultan, he was defeated very thoroughly, and he actually even died in the battle itself. Okay, Tipu Sultan met hero's end, which means he died on 4th May 1799 while defending his capital of Srirangapatnam. Clear? His army remained loyal to him till the very end. There was no betrayal or anything at that time. His army fought alongside him with full sincerity and full wholeheartedness. But unfortunately, he couldn't do anything. He was isolated all in all. Lots of his territories were already given away after the third Anglo-Mysore War. Finally, Tipu Sultan died. And that came to the end of fourth Anglo-Mysore War. Okay, and after this war, the kingdom of Mysore was restored to the original descendants. Hyder Ali actually took this from Nanga Raja, and the puppet ruler at that time was Chikka Krishna Raja. Okay, so this territory of Mysore was restored back to his descendants, Krishna Raja's descendants. Clear? An important result of the fourth Anglo-Mysore War was the complete elimination of French threat to British supremacy in India. Tipu Sultan was the one person who effectively backed the French. French also liked him. And now Tipu Sultan is out. He is no more. And Mysore is also now under the hands of Britain, which means no more French threat anywhere in India. Okay, so this was the result of fourth Anglo-Mysore War. Okay, I think no questions from you. So let's continue. We are almost at the end of the session. Okay, don't worry. Only a few more points to be noted. In 1801, I'm taking a long session because tomorrow I have no session. So if you are saturated, you can stop it here and watch this video sometime tomorrow. Okay, day after tomorrow I have planned a MCQ session on current affairs. I will put it in the group. Please be ready accordingly. Okay. So in 1801, Lord Wellesley forced a new treaty upon the puppet Nawab of Karnataka, compelling him to cede his kingdom to the company in return for a handsome pension. So now, already Nawab of Karnataka is a puppet in the hands of company, but now the company wants that territory all to itself. Okay, so the company basically forced the Nawab of Karnataka into a pension and took the control all by himself. Marathas were the only major power in India that is left outside the sphere of British control. Okay, but with the Treaty of Salbai, using that 20 years of peace, British has made sure that Marathas declined themselves. Okay, the prominent leaders of Marathas such as Mahatji Scindia, Tukoji Holkar, Ahilyabai Holkar, Peshwa Madhav II, Nana Fadnis, everybody died of natural causes or whatever by 1800. Okay, by 1800 there was nobody in Maratha power who could actually, lead an army that is mighty enough to destroy English power in India. And Maratha chiefs, as usual, were fighting against each other. And during one of these infighting, Yashwantrao Holkar on one side and Daulatrao Scindia and Peshwa Bajirao II on the other side. Okay, Yashwantrao Holkar on one side versus Daulatrao Scindia and Peshwa Bajirao II. Okay, this battle was going on, and Yashwantrao Holkar started to win this. Okay, actually he defeated the combined armies of Scindia and Peshwa. October 25, 1802, Holkar defeated the combined armies of Peshwa and Scindia, and the cowardly Peshwa Bajirao II rushed to the hands of British and accepted the Treaty of Subsidiary Alliance, which is also known as the Treaty of Bassein. Okay, until now, the people like Nana Fadnis made sure that they will not accept Subsidiary Alliance because they were visionaries. They knew what will happen once they accept Subsidiary Alliance. But now, when they all have died, the coward and utterly worthless Peshwa of all, Peshwa Bajirao II, he actually went to the British for help and signed the Subsidiary Alliance. So British basically got a lottery. Okay, they were hoping for something like this, and they got whatever they wanted, exactly what they wanted. The proud Marathas, but even after signing this Subsidiary Alliance, Maratha chiefs were not ready to give away their tradition and all. They were still very proud people. No, Marathas are always proud. Rajputs, Marathas, etc., etc. Okay, so they picked up a battle between British, and the British armies led by Arthur Wellesley defeated the combined armies of Scindia and Bosley at Assaye in September 1803 and at Argonne in November. Similarly, Lord Lake routed Scindia's army at Laswari and occupied Aligarh, Delhi and Agra. You don't have to study all these things. You don't have to remember all these things. These are just the course of war. You can skip this. Okay, just understand the big story, causes of war, what happened in the end, and how did British benefit from this. Okay, but although they managed to defeat the Scindias, the Bonsleys, and the other areas such as Delhi, Agra, etc., Yashwantrao Holkar was still a formidable leader, one of the best. Okay, their British calculation against Yashwantrao Holkar did not work. Maratha tactics of mobile warfare and alliance with the Jats, okay, with the help of Jats and with modern mobile warfare techniques of the Marathas, Yashwantrao Holkar managed to fight with British and arrive at a standstill. Okay, he was helped by his friends, the Raja of Bharatpur, etc. Okay, and forgetting his age-old rivalry with the Holkar family, Scindia also began to join hands with Holkar. Okay, until now they were infighting between each other, but when Yashwantrao Holkar has effectively, put British on hold, Scindia also backed the Holkars. Clear? But now these wars were costing very much to the British company. Okay, constant battles. Against Mysore, 4 battles were fought. Against Marathas also battles are continuing. Okay, we have fought battles in Bengal, okay, in Carnatic. So this is costing a lot to the company. So the shareholders of the company discovered that the policy of expansion through war is proving to be very much costly. They wanted profit. They don't want war if they can avoid it. Okay, so they decided to change the policy. Okay, also British finances were getting exhausted at the time of Napoleon rising in France. In France, Napoleon was coming back. Okay, and Napoleonic wars were going on there. and lot of money had to be put on to Napoleonic wars also against Napoleon. Clear? So in general, company decided to drop the policy of expansion through wars for now, at least for now. And Wellesley was called back. It was Wellesley's idea. Okay, this tactics was employed by Wellesley. So Wellesley was actually called back from India, and company decided to make peace with Holkar in January 1806, and the Treaty of Rajkot was signed, giving back all the territories to Holkar. Okay, all the captured territories were given back to Yashwantrao Holkar. He was a very formidable leader. Clear? To the Treaty of Rajkot, don't forget. Now, expansion under Lord Hastings. Okay, so the lead in organizing a united front of Maratha chiefs was taken by Peshwa. Okay, again, Peshwas were the typical paws in Maratha, in the Maratha lines at that time. Amongst all the families, okay, Peshwas, Holkars, Scindias, Bhonsles, etc. Peshwas were the most powerful. So Peshwa took to try to unite the Marathas together, form a very strong state. Okay, and Peshwa attacked the British residency in Pune. Appa Sahib attacked residency in Nagpur. Madhav Holkar prepared for war. Okay, together they tried to subdue Britain. But the Governor General Lord Hastings was pretty good in commanding an army, a very good leader. He compelled Scindia to accept British suzerainty, defeated the armies of Peshwa, Bhonsle and Holkar. Peshwa was dethroned and pensioned off in Bittur near Kanpur. Territories were annexed and enlarged. Presidency of Bombay brought into existence. Holkar and Bhonsle accepted subsidiary alliance. Okay, basically Marathas were rooted out. Okay, Lord Hastings was pretty good general, and he managed to defeat the combined armies of Holkar, Bhonsle and Peshwa. Okay, the Maratha supremacy hereby comes to an end. But to satisfy the pride of Marathas, a small kingdom of Satara was founded out of the Peshwa's lands and given to Chhatrapati Shivaji's descendant. Chhatrapati Shivaji was the champion of Marathas. Na? So his descendant at that time was given this small territory. The territory was actually founded just to save the Maratha pride. Okay, and again, the descendant of Maratha, descendant of Chhatrapati Shivaji was supposed to be a puppet in the hands of Britain. Clear? Later we will see that Dalhousie, using the doctrine of lapse, annexes Satara also. Okay, Satara is the first state annexed by Lord Dalhousie using the policy of doctrine of lapse. Anyway, by 1818, the entire Indian subcontinent except Punjab and Sindh were brought under control by Britain. Okay, all the prominent powers are subdued. Marathas, Mysore, Nizam of Hyderabad, Bengal, Nawab of Bengal, everyone subdued. Mughal Emperor. Now let's see Sindh. Okay, only two more portions remaining, Sindh and Punjab. Okay, that's the end of this session. Maximum 10 minutes more. Okay, conquest of Sindh. So, what was the reason why that prompted Britain to conquest Sindh? What was the attraction of Sindh? Primary attraction was Anglo-Russian rivalry. England and Russia were at war with each other. I mean, they were prominent rivals at that time. Okay, and British fears that Russia might attack India through Afghanistan or Persia actually made them to conquer Sindh. Okay, British feared that Russia might attack India through Afghanistan or Persia. Okay, so if this is India, okay, assume that this is India. Okay, I will draw this roughly. Here we have the Pakistan region, here we have the Afghanistan region, and here we have the Russian region. So the Britishers thought that Russia could attack India through Afghanistan through the territory of Sindh. So Britishers wanted some territory as a buffer against a possible Russian attack. This is why they attacked Sindh. Also, commercial possibilities of the river Sindh were an additional attraction. Okay, the region has plenty of rivers, so it had prominent commercial and communication possibilities that also attracted them towards Sindh. Okay, the chiefs of Sindh, known as the Amirs, were made to sign a subsidiary treaty in 1839, and Sindh was annexed in 1843 after a brief campaign by Charles Napier. Okay, Charles Napier conducted a campaign in Sindh and annexed it in 1843. Okay, that's it. Basically, Sindh was to act as a buffer between a possible future Russian attack. Okay, and now Punjab. the conquest of Punjab. Okay, last chapter, and we have come to the end of this session. So, yesterday I told you that Maharaja Ranjit Singh was the key between Punjab and British. And Ranjit Singh died in 1839. And after his death, there was a instability throughout the territory of Punjab. And finally, the power fell into the hands of the Punjab army. Problem was, Punjab army was extremely undisciplined. Okay, I mean, infighting, quarrels, etc., etc. They were very patriotic and all, but still, I mean, they were very courageous, pretty sincere and all, but pretty indisciplined at the same time. In November 1844, Major Broadfoot, who was known to be hostile to Sikhs, was appointed by the British as the agent in Ludhiana. Ludhiana is in Punjab. I mean, the province of Punjab at that time. Okay, and British appointed Major Broadfoot in Ludhiana. And Major Broadfoot is actually very infamous for his hostile treatment towards Sikhs. Okay, and once he was appointed there, more and more army, more and more barrages, etc. were started to be built around this region. Okay, new fleets started arriving towards this region, etc., etc. And now suddenly the Punjabis, Punjab army started to think that British is actually going to attack them. Okay, I mean, suddenly a hostile character, a tension arose between Punjab and Britain. Okay, the danger from the foreign enemy immediately united Hindus, Muslims and the Sikhs. So when British started to amalgamate their forces towards Punjab, suddenly Punjab became united. Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims all came together and they fought a battle with England. But unfortunately, some of the leaders turned out to be traitors, as usual. This happens everywhere in India. I mean, if you pick any battle in India, and you will see lots of traitors who helped Britain against India. Okay, even in 1857, this happens. Alright, so here also, there were plenty of traitors within the Punjab army who sided with the British. For example, the Prime Minister, Raja Lal Singh. Prime Minister, think of it. Okay, Prime Minister of Punjab, Lala Lal Singh. Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Tej Singh. So both Prime Minister and Commander-in-Chief are siding with Britain against their own country. Okay, so despite army trying their sincere best efforts, they lost. Okay, Punjab army was forced to concede defeat, and a humiliating treaty known as the Treaty of Lahore was signed on 8th of March 1846. British annexed the Jalandhar Doab and handed over Jammu and Kashmir to Raja Ghulam Singh Dogra for a cash payment of 5 million rupees. So Punjab, the final power which opposed Britain, is also conquered. Okay, now there is no other power in India against Britain. Britain is the sole leader in Punjab. In 1848, the freedom-loving Punjabis rose in numerous revolts. Okay, for example, Mulraj in Multan, Chhattar Singh Atariwala near Lahore. So such rebellions started forming in 1848, but they were no match for British power. Okay, these rebellions are always, not properly organized or planned or anything. British army, on the other hand, is extremely well trained and well disciplined. So they were able to easily defeat the Punjab rebellions. Okay, and Lord Dalhousie seized this opportunity to annex Punjab. Okay, Lord Dalhousie, who was appointed to India around this time, he seized this opportunity by crushing these rebellions to annex Punjab into the British territory. Thus, the last independent state of India was absorbed in the British Empire of India. Okay, every other power has been subjugated. Carnatic, Bengal, Mysore, Marathas, Sindh, and now Punjab also. Okay, so the entire Indian subcontinent is now in the hands of British. So this is the last slide for today, the Dalhousie and the policy of annexation. Dalhousie came to India in 1848 and stayed until 1856, around 8 years. Okay, so he believed that British administration was far superior compared to the Indian administration, which was extremely corrupt, etc., etc. Okay, he considered himself and the British as superiors towards Indians and Indians as inferiors. Okay, and he designed a policy named as the Doctrine of Lapse. Okay, so according to this policy, when a ruler of a protected state died without a natural heir, okay, very important word there, natural heir, his state was not to pass to an adopted heir, as sanctioned by the age-old tradition of the country. Instead, it was to be annexed to the British dominions unless the adopted had been clearly approved earlier by the British authorities. So basically, if a king dies without having a male heir of his own blood, okay, adopted son will not be counted. If he dies without having a male heir on his own, then that kingdom will automatically go to Britain, unless Britain has already approved that the adopted ruler can continue there. British will decide. Okay, if British accepts the adopted ruler can continue. Otherwise, that kingdom will automatically get annexed to the British Empire. This is the doctrine of lapse implemented by Lord Dalhousie. The first province to be annexed based on this policy was Satara in the year 1848. Later, we will see other states also getting annexed, such as Nagpur, Jhansi, Rani Lakshmi Bai's effective resistance, etc. We remember, na? Similarly, Sambalpur. All these states are annexed one by Dalhousie. Okay, Dalhousie also did not like the idea of keeping the titles of the Nawabs of Carnatic and Raja of Travancore, etc. So he abolished a lot of Indian titles also. Okay, by abolishing those titles, he de-recognized all these Rajas. Clear? Similarly, Dalhousie refused to extend Bajirau's pension to his adopted son Nana Sahib. When we study 1857 revolt, we will know that Nana Sahib also entered the revolt because British treated him badly. British did not grant him the pension of his father, Peshwa Bajirao II. That is the reason why Nana Sahib participates in 1857 revolt. Okay, this also was Dalhousie's doing. Alright, Oudh. Okay, Dalhousie wanted to annex Oudh. Oudh was a very profitable province. Okay, but he couldn't find any excuse to do that. I mean, Oudh has plenty of natural heirs. Oudh was very much friendly towards Britain. Okay, so he couldn't find a ground to annex Oudh. So what did he do now? He annexed Oudh on the pretext of misgovernance. He accused Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, who was the ruler of Oudh, on misgovernance, and he annexed Oudh. See, because he couldn't find a genuine reason to annex Oudh, he annexed Oudh by building a reason. Clear? This turned the people of Oudh against Dalhousie. We will see that in 1857 revolt, Oudh joined that revolt because of this humiliation. Clear? Then, Dalhousie took away the cotton-producing province of Berar from Nizam in 1853 for commercial interests. Clear? It has to be clearly understood that the question of maintenance of annexation of the native states was of not much relevance here. I mean, we would think, why should he annex Oudh? Oudh is already a puppet for Britain. I mean, almost all the states in India are already a puppet in the hands of Britain. Basically, Britain will decide what these states will do. So what is the point of annexation? Okay, there is no relevance to annexation actually. Annexation happens only if British find it more convenient, that's all. Okay, by annexing, if British finds it more convenient to rule that area, then they will annex it, that's all. There is no difference between annexation and keeping a puppet ruler in reality, on practical purposes, because whatever it is, Britain is the actual ruler. Clear? So this is Lord Dalhousie's policy of annexation, and we will stop at this point here. We have come until 1856. We have skipped certain things such as the Charter Act of 1813, 17 Regulating Act, etc., etc. That portion, the polity portion, we will take it up later. For now, we will complete the political history of India until independence in modern India. Okay, so I think we will stop it here. Thank you everybody who has been patiently waiting here. I mean, this class went almost for 3 hours, but if you feel saturated, watch it in parts and parts. Split the class into 3 and watch part by part. I hope you understood at least something from these classes. If you haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe. I will upload the entire PPT in my Telegram channel, t.me/msrw1 in 5 minutes. You can download it from there and reread this. Okay, I hope this will make it the revision very much easier for you. Okay, so that's it. If you have any queries or etc., you can ask. Please put in your comments in the public comment section after I stop this video. Also make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Okay, also share with your friends. Okay, on that note, we will stop it here today. Thank you for joining. Until next time. Okay.